Yeah, you can go ahead and start this. You can start the streaming. We're good? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I call to order this meeting of the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. And I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement, as is our usual practice, but I'd first like to share about the Chiniki First Nation inauguration that I attended with a number of other dignitaries and members of the community out in Manithini. And during my remarks, I announced, as you know, that the town of Canmore will be supporting the 2024 Stampede Princess getting new regalia for the event. This is the first time that a Stoney Nakoda princess has been chosen as the Stampede Princess since 2022 or 2002, and so it's been a long time coming, and it was received really, really well. Much appreciation. And just, I think that they appreciated that that was on our radar even. So that was good. It was a good day. And now, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I acknowledge that we are gathered in the heart of Treaty 7 territory of Southern Alberta. This land is home to the Blackfoot Confederacy, consisting of the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani First Nations, also the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and our most adjacent Indigenous neighbors, the Stoney Nakoda, comprised of the Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Chiniki First Nations. Further, we are located within the Métis Nation of Alberta District 4. The town of Canmore is committed to working to live in right relations and to advance truth and reconciliation as we acknowledge the many Indigenous people whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. I'm grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. Now turning to the agenda. Are there any changes? I'm seeing none, so I'll move approval of the agenda for the March 19th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now we'll move to our delegation from CYAN. Ms. Jameson, I believe that you're going to make an introduction for us.
Mayor Krausert and councillors, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to introduce Nicole Eplet. She is a very busy leader with several roles in our community, and one is as the part-time executive director of the Canmore Young Adult Network, also known as CYAN. She's going to share an update of CYAN activities and impact. Over to you.
Thank you. And welcome to Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. Do I pull it up? All right, thank you, councillors and Mayor Krausert, for giving me the opportunity to speak today about the Canmore Young Adult Network. Today we'll go through the who, the what, the why, the when of CYAN, tracing its growth back for 6 years. So CYAN, short for the Canmore Young Adult Network, is a nonprofit organization aimed at providing affordable resources and events to the young adults of our valley. We tailor ages 18 to 35-year-olds, but we do not discriminate. Anyone is welcome. Our goal is to foster connections among young adults within the broader community. CYAN emerged from discussions at the Ralph Connor United Memorial Church, recognizing a lack of young adult engagement and the transient nature of this demographic and their disconnect from the community. Nearly 6 years ago, CYAN was established to provide a network to connect with each other, organize safe events and available resources, as well as having their voices heard. We are now operating as a fully functional nonprofit, with the Ralph Connor serving as our physical agent for the past 6 years. CYAN is now in a high growth stage, which we are trying to keep up with the demand of the young adults and the community members. We just hosted a survey from December 2023 to January 2024 with 66 respondents. The majority of the respondents fell within CYAN's target age of 18 to 35-year-olds. We also see almost 50% of respondents coming from a different country other than Canada, which is still highlighting the transient town nature. Respondents highlighted several challenges in our survey, with the top 4 being affordability, housing, isolation, and the longevity of living in the valley. Financially, many struggle to meet the cost of living, with a significant portion earning below what is considered an affordable wage, while they were averaging around $26.70 an hour in wages. The rent, they averaged individually at $1,700, just less. And housing, of course, particularly with the high rental costs in Canmore, was highlighted as a pressing issue, with the majority of respondents sharing accommodation with roommates or partners. We continue to ask and understand why young adults engage with CYAN. The primary reasons include making friends, assessing mental health resources, our affordable events, and feeling a sense of community, often through volunteer opportunities. A quarter of our respondents reported learning new skills or resources through CYAN's programs and information. We have a full team of various expertise behind the operations of CYAN, from environmental coordinators to marketing coordinators, and we are happy to provide an opportunity for young adults to develop their resume and provide expertise to CYAN. CYAN has 12 team members representing over 9 different nationalities, with over 62 years of experience combined living in the valley. CYAN recognizes the financial challenges faced by many in the community. Therefore, we provide secondary employment opportunities to support individuals seeking additional income. In response to our increasing demand for programs and community involvement requests, CYAN has expanded its operations by 33.3% in the past year, allowing a greater opportunity for community engagement and outreach, as well as diversifying our programs that are offered. As our operations grow, so does our network. With over 5,600 followers across various channels, the significant increase in following reflects our proactive outreach efforts, as well as the increased demand in the CYAN programs. We are seeing higher turnouts for all events than ever before, with capacities hitting full capacities at 99% of our events are hitting at full capacities. CYAN has diversified its programming to meet the evolving needs of the young adults in our community, while providing various learning opportunities that many would not have been able to afford at a full cost. In 2023, we hosted over 100 events with over 1,600 young adults participating. 2023, we have implemented consistent mental, physical, and social well-being programming. We have hosted various workshops to teach new skills in many areas at all subsidized or free of cost rates. From Latin dance lessons, mindfulness goal setting, paint nights, and guided snowshoeing, we offer an array of opportunities for young adults to learn and connect through our programs. Often our events sell out, as mentioned, and we were seeing sometimes double the turnout from 2021 events, to our staple events such as Pasta Night, where we see over 100 young adults come out to eat, and our weekly yoga nights at the Yoga Lounge, where we see over 20 to 30 participants as an average. Looking ahead into 2024, CYAN will continue expanding its programming with a projected 40.6% increase in our events and participants. New initiatives such as our life skills workshops, we just hosted our first Taxes 101, conversations with the mayor, and our environmental volunteer givebacks will further diversify our offerings and also provide a sense of community involvement to our participants. Our operational expansion has enabled CYAN to focus on collaborations and relationship building with various organizations, local businesses, and community members. CYAN continues to touch further into the valley by participating in community booths and presentations, and as of 2024, connecting with HR and leaders in large businesses for presentations and information providing to their young adult staff. We also actively participate in community initiatives and have seats at the tables for groups such as the Bow Valley Safer Spaces, the YWCA's Harmony Project, and the Bow Valley Young Adult Coalition. A core objective of CYAN is to bridge the gap between young adults and the broader community. We often provide opportunities for nonprofits and organizations to speak at our events. We promote local volunteer opportunities in our volunteer base of almost 300 young adults. And we provide a platform for the town, local businesses, and local resources to be able to reach the young adults of our community through our social media. CYAN requires funds in order to operate and provide these affordable options to young adults. Over the past year, we have almost doubled our operating budget based on our current operational costs and our programming structure. CYAN in 2023 was approved for $35,000 in grants, with $30,000 approved for early 2024 deposits. With event donations and approved grants, we have received over just $55,000 of income in 2023. CYAN is committed to applying for approximately $186,000 in grants in 2024, with a forecast of a 39% higher increase in our event income. Our current operating budget for 2024 is forecasted just shy of $90,000. To ensure a sustainable future for CYAN, we are looking to diversify our income sources through options such as fundraisers, sponsorship, in-kind support, cause marketing, and other options to ensure funding structure to keep CYAN growing and moving. In this slide, you can just see some of the grant applications that we have applied for or will be applying for in 2024. And our goals. As we navigate the year ahead, CYAN remains committed to meeting the needs of young adults in Canmore, as well as meeting the needs of the community. Our goal in 2024 is to strengthen CYAN and continue growing to meet the demands. Our areas of focus are expansion of our operations in order to meet the goals below we require with having the people in place. Secondly is expanding and diversifying our programming to focus on learning opportunities and give back opportunities to the community. Thirdly is to continue our focus on outreach within the community and businesses to ensure CYAN is a well-known nonprofit. Fourthly is the diversifying of funding opportunities to ensure a sustainable funding structure. And lastly, it's to ensure a sustainable future for CYAN and continue growth. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Aplett, for coming today. And I'm just going to look to my colleagues to see if there are any questions that arose from your presentation. Seeing none, which means you gave a very good presentation. You hit all of the high points. I just want to commend CYAN for all of the efforts that it has done over the years, and in particular, being persistent and staying the course despite COVID. I know that was a very, very tough time for a lot of organizations, but especially one that is based around people coming together. Right, so good job, and it looks like you're just continuing to do more and more. Councillor Ma, did you have a question?
Thank you, Worship. Not so much a question, just wanted to say thanks to everything that you guys do. I know I interact with you guys like regularly, and it's lovely to see the great work you have, and I wish you guys all the luck with your grant applications coming forward. Great job, Nicole.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to, it's coming up not too long from now, the first spilling tea with the mayor.
Yes.
And hopefully that those will bring some good questions and good conversations. So,
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being with us here today.
Thank you.
I'll now turn to the item C1, the minutes of January 23rd. Does anybody have any errors or omissions that they noticed? Seeing none, I'll move approval of the minutes of January 23rd, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now we'll move to item D1, status of the Bow Valley nonprofit sector. Ms. Wellman, welcome to Committee of the Whole.
It's on. It's red. Perfect. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. Thank you for your time today. My name is Laura Wellman, and I am the FCSS Family and Community Worker, and I'm here today to provide an update on the status of the Bow Valley nonprofit sector and to share some of the 2023 Nonprofit Survey Report data with you. I'm joined today with our FCSS Supervisor. Ms. Gilchrist supported the nonprofit portfolio for many years prior to my taking it over in 2023. She has made her experience and knowledge available to us today to support with any questions of a historical nature that Council may have. I'm very fortunate to have been provided the nonprofit portfolio last year. It's been a privilege to bear witness to the significant impact the nonprofit sector has on community. It's quite timely that CYAN was before Council today as a delegation, as CYAN is a great example of what can result when community gets curious about an issue, finds the resources to address emerging needs, and convenes community partners to advance solutions. I've had the honor of being connected to CYAN as a Friends of CYAN member for the last 6 years, and I've bore witness to a fledgling project become an organized board with paid staff that is now before Council, demonstrating the scope and breadth of impact to community that was presented to us today. This work is tremendously rewarding, and I'm honored to be before you to share some data and to cast some light on this tremendously influential sector. Today's presentation will cover the following content, beginning with an overview of why nonprofit sector health is important. I will provide some context and brief history of the collected nonprofit support work. This will include some key highlights and actions from the 2020 nonprofit survey and 2 key projects that emerged from that work that continue to support nonprofits in the Valley today. I will then provide highlights from the most recent 2023 survey data. The agenda package includes an attachment of the full nonprofit survey report for your review, and I will present on some key findings from that data today. And the presentation will conclude with next steps for FCSS's role in the collective work to support the nonprofit sector. We can begin by exploring why the health of our nonprofit sector is important. There are a multitude of reasons, and this is not an exhaustive list, but a few key factors that hold synergy with the work of municipalities. Nonprofit organizations are commonly recognized for their broader societal roles as service providers that support individual and community well-being. They are a vital part of building community resilience. The nonprofit sector also plays an important role in providing opportunities for civic engagement and for the shaping of municipal, provincial, and national policy. More specifically, numerous Bow Valley nonprofits work to meet mutually beneficial community outcomes, including those related to Council's goals of livability, environment, and relationship. The nonprofit sector is reporting a trend toward increased connection to municipalities, primarily as advocates, capacity builders, funders, partners, and collaborators. These relationships are considered effective and efficient ways to further the quality of life and increase the continuity of support for community. As a municipality, we simply could not meet the volume, breadth, scope, and diversity of community offerings with tax dollars alone, without significant support from the nonprofit sector. We can essentially view the nonprofit sector like we do an indicator species, akin to an organism whose presence, absence, or abundance reflects a specific environmental condition. Indicator species can signal a change in the condition of a particular ecosystem, and thus may be used as a proxy to diagnose the health of that ecosystem. In other words, the health of our nonprofit sector and the sector's ability to thrive is directly related to the health of our community and the ability of those in it to thrive. It's therefore imperative that as an organization, we have our finger on the pulse of the impact and needs of the nonprofit sector. Locally, there's collaborative history between the Town of Canmore and Town of Banff FCSSs, wherein human and funding resources are pooled to support capacity building efforts for the Bow Valley nonprofit sector. Every 3 to 5 years, the nonprofit community is surveyed to learn the current challenges, needs, and strengths to best maximize resources and to strategically support the sector. The most recent nonprofit surveys were conducted in 2015, 2020, and again most recently in 2023. The primary focus of this presentation will be on the 2023 survey results. However, I would like to take a moment to highlight a couple of the 2020 key themes and deliverables as they continue to support the nonprofit sector as legacy contributions today. One of the key learnings that emerged from the 2020 COVID-19 nonprofit survey was that many social agencies were struggling to provide services in meaningful ways. This was due to widespread cancellation of shows, festivals, and classes, recreational facilities being shut down, followed by capacity restrictions upon reopening, and the widespread cancellation of fundraising events, activities, and casinos that typically would generate significant revenue and membership engagement for nonprofits. As many of us can vividly recall, the pandemic was a period of tremendous pivoting in order to secure some level of continuity of supports and services to community, and the nonprofit sector was not immune to this experience. In 2020, Council approved capital funding to provide social supports funding for community members most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. A portion of that social supports funding went to increase capacity of the nonprofit sector. Specific data collected from the 2020 survey resulted in collaborative actions being taken by Town of Canmore and Town of Banff FCSSs to embark on 2 key projects to support the nonprofit sector, both during and post-pandemic. The first project was the development of the Bow Valley Nonprofits website. It is essentially a one-stop shop for nonprofits to access resources, training tools, and funding opportunities to support sector work. Ongoing maintenance of this website is supported by the pooling of Town of Canmore and Town of Banff FCSS funding. The website content and design were based on feedback from local nonprofit organizations, and some of the key features of the website include a list of Bow Valley nonprofit organizations, access to a nonprofit resource library that currently houses over 300 resources, training and funding opportunities along with a list of local freelance contractors. There's also a What's New blog, an opportunity for nonprofits to sign up for newsletter updates. Our website contractor provided a KPI report in January 2024 for the Bow Valley Nonprofits website, and the analytics report highlighted that 1,500 people had visited the website in 2023, and with those visits, 3,000 website pages were viewed. Currently, there are discussions in the nonprofit community around how to continue to expand the website's scope with the potential use of additional resources and software to enhance collective resources and asset sharing models. The second project from the 2020 capital funding was the development of a nonprofit speaker series, whereby subject matter experts provided online supports and learning resources to assist nonprofits. The training topics were directly linked to identified needs from the Bow Valley nonprofit sector survey. These projects were in part chosen for their legacy components. There was a strong desire at the time to ensure that the supports created would expand beyond the COVID-19 pandemic and would serve the nonprofit sector for future years. The website continues to be highly utilized today, and the speaker series was recorded with links to the sessions housed on the website for ongoing access. This concludes the history portion of the presentation, and I will now share some of the highlights from the 2023 nonprofit survey results. The most recent nonprofit survey was launched mid-August of 2023. The survey was sent out via email to 167 nonprofits and community groups in the Bow Valley. 85 respondents completed the survey, resulting in a 51% response rate. At the same time as the survey launch, additional resources were provided to expand the Bow Valley Nonprofits website's reach by creating Facebook and Instagram pages that linked back to the website. This allowed us to advertise the survey link on multiple platforms, as well as re-engage the nonprofit sector with prompts to visit the website and connect them with additional resources and supports. In addition to the survey launch and creation of social media platforms, Canmore and Banff FCSS has hosted 2 events for the nonprofit sector. 32 participants from the community attended. These events were an opportunity to present the survey findings back to the sector to confirm accuracy, and tabletop conversations at the event provided opportunity to dive deeper into some of the survey themes. The data presented today is representative of both the quantitative survey data and the qualitative tabletop conversation data. Participants were asked what type of organization they represented. The largest grouping identified as nonprofit, followed by registered charity. Some other designations include community group and social enterprise. With regards to geographical regions served, the majority of respondents noted their organization served Canmore and Banff, followed by ID9 and MD of Bighorn. Other areas served include Kananaskis, Minithini, Overseas, and Calgary area. Respondents were asked about their total operating budget, and as we can see by the responses, the vast majority of Bow Valley nonprofits operate with less than $250,000 annual budget, with the largest proportion of nonprofits operating between $100,000 and $250,000. Participants were asked what best describes their level of engagement with membership, participation, and/or registration in the last 12 months. 88% reported that their level of engagement had increased or stayed the same in the last year. It is important to note that of the 55% who reported an increase in engagement, 74% noted this was due to increased demand, and 39% noted this was due to increased partnership and collaboration. Some of the reasons reported for decreased engagement included less volunteers. The other category included variables such as affordability and families being stretched for funds to participate, including an inability to remain in the Bow Valley due to affordability challenges. Staffing challenges referred to less staff being hired and/or staffing hours having decreased. Respondents were asked if their organization was financially stable. 60% of participants reported that their organization is financially stable for this fiscal year, but reported looming uncertainty for the next fiscal year. Some of the reported reasons for this uncertainty were that unrestricted funding is required for ongoing operations, but not readily available, that there is heavy reliance on donations and one-time project-based grants to meet increasing demands. There is a general decrease in government and non-government granting opportunities. And the desire to keep membership fees low requires subsidy from grants and donations. However, donor opportunities have greater demands and limited increase to financial resources. An example of increased donor demands includes the experience the Town of Canmore Community Grants Program had in 2023. Requests for funding last year were 4 times the allotment. We received 33 applications of over $130,000 in funding requests for a $30,000 allotment. This is a substantial increase from the year prior when the Community Grants Program saw 14 applicants requesting $59,000 in funding. The increase in demand for limited funding opportunities is a very real and complex challenge for the nonprofit sector. When it comes to main sources of revenue, survey participants reported that their top generators are events and fundraisers, followed closely by private donations. Local funders include Banff Canmore Foundation, Rotary, and the Women Nancy Powell Foundation. In addition to these top 4, participants also noted provincial funding, member donations, sponsorship, and registration fees as sources of revenue. Not surprisingly, when we asked what their top 3 expenditures were, respondents reported that staffing, programming, and facility costs were the highest expenses to their organization. In addition to these top 3, respondents noted equipment and supplies and insurance costs as expenditures. Survey participants were asked about their current state of funding compared to the year previous, and 46% reported funding stayed about the same, 36% reported an increase in funding, and 18% reported a decrease. Some of the reasons why an increase was reported was due to carryover from COVID-related funding sources, increased programming capacity and membership fees to offset increasing costs, and access to casino fundraisers following pandemic restrictions lifting in early 2022. Additionally, some participants reported that although their funding has increased slightly, it is only matching rates of inflation and increasing costs, therefore no actual benefit is realized as it relates to expansion of services to meet increasing demands. The increase in funding is simply maintaining status quo. Some of the reasons reported why there was a decrease in funding were due to limited capacity to fundraise due to volunteer shortages, increased competition for available grant funding, and general decreased opportunities for government funding. Survey participants were asked what percentage of their organization's work is done by paid staff, volunteers, and/or contractors. As we can see, the human resource breakdown is almost equally split between volunteers and paid staff, with 46% and 42% respectively. An interesting trend has emerged with regards to increasing reliance on volunteers. Respondents from the 2015 nonprofit survey reported 72% of their work being completed by paid staff, compared with the 42% we see in 2023. While only 28% of nonprofits reported relying on volunteers back in 2015, compared with 46% relying on volunteers in 2023. This is an interesting phenomenon that will be explored in greater detail at the next nonprofit collective event to gain some clarity and insight on this trend and subsequent impacts. Survey participants were asked if the human resources they currently have are sufficient and sustainable. Sufficient and sustainable were defined as being able to meet the current demands of their service provision, and that there are no concerns of being able to continue to meet current demands in the future. As we can see, only 29% of nonprofits reported that their human resources are sufficient and sustainable. When we asked participants to unpack some of the challenges related to human resources, respondents from the survey and participants at the nonprofit collective events noted 3 key human resource themes that impact their operations. Namely, that resources are precarious. Some participants expressed that the loss of one single granting source has the potential to destabilize the organization. Restricted funding is part of this precariousness and is one of the most commonly reported challenges in the nonprofit sector. Namely, that funding is primarily 1 year and attached to a specific project, and there is limited access to unrestricted funding that can be used for ongoing operations and fundraising endeavors. Secondly, market challenges have an ever-growing impact on nonprofits, just as they do residents and municipalities. These include cost of living demands and an inability to pay wages that can keep people in the valley, delays and challenges for hiring due to market forces, high cost of living that deter folks from applying for lower paid positions, or that require folks to work more than one job and therefore less capacity to volunteer. This has also resulted in an increase in board and leadership vacancies due to the various market challenges. And thirdly, volunteer capacity was the last theme identified. Some of the volunteer challenges include recruitment difficulties due to folks needing to work multiple jobs with limited time and resource to volunteer, which in turn can result in increased rates of volunteer burnout for those who find themselves in volunteer positions. As mentioned previously, there has been a reported increase in the use of volunteers as a primary source of human resource for many nonprofit operations. And with paid staff on the decline, this can create a perfect storm for widespread human resource capacity issues in the sector. Continuing with the theme of nonprofit resources, participants were asked if their current facilities, namely meeting, office, and programming space, are sufficient and sustainable. As we can see by the numbers, space continues to be an ongoing issue for almost half of the nonprofits surveyed. Some reported challenges related to space include a high dependence on volunteers using their own homes to manage the work of the nonprofit, limited growth opportunities and inability to meet increasing demands due to space constraints, and high cost for some available spaces, making program expansion cost prohibitive for many nonprofits. I would like to take a moment to summarize some of the key learnings from the 2023 survey and nonprofit collective event conversations. We determined that human resources are a challenge for many nonprofits, with only 29% of the 85 respondents reporting that their current human resources were sufficient and sustainable. We were informed that space and facility are not sufficient nor sustainable for many nonprofits, with 49% of respondents reporting that their current facility is insufficient and unsustainable to do the work of their organization. Although 60% of respondents reported that their organization was financially stable, said stability was only for the current fiscal year, with significant uncertainty for subsequent years. Both the quantitative and qualitative data highlighted that unrestricted operational funding is not readily accessible. There is also heavy reliance on donations and grants to meet increasing demands, which contributes to financial instability for some Bow Valley nonprofits. In the survey, we asked participants if they felt their organization excelled in any of the learning opportunity categories listed in a previous question, and there were 67 unique responses of what organizations felt they did well, demonstrating that there is tremendous knowledge, experience, and skills attached to Bow Valley nonprofits. Recognizing the unique assets in the Bow Valley, it has us thinking about asset mapping and subsequently the impact shared platforms and centralized resources could have as a capacity building possibility in the future. The town of Canmore is currently supporting nonprofit capacity building in the following ways. Canmore FCSS, in partnership with Banff FCSS, provides ongoing maintenance for the Bow Valley Nonprofits website, including accompanying resource library and subsequent newsletter. With regards to grant supports, Canmore FCSS provides all nonprofits with free access to the Canadian Grants Database subscription, and the Town of Canmore administers the Community Grants Program, as well as the coordination of monthly nonprofit grant meetings led by the Town of Canmore CSD Community Evaluator. FCSS staff support with nonprofit and community group board development by providing learning opportunities, assisting with the development of processes related to strategic planning, supporting applications for status, and opportunities for the sector to convene to share skills and resources. The Town of Canmore also offers not-for-profit rates for facility rental use, as well as various event support services provided by town departments. In conclusion, the quantitative and qualitative data indicate that there are areas of support that would benefit from continued maintenance, expansion, as well as the addition of new supports. As Canmore and Banff FCSSs continue with collaborative work to support the nonprofit sector, and as we align our work and resources with the Bow Valley Nonprofit Report's key recommendations, we have committed to the following deliverables in 2024. Firstly, we will continue with organizing the Bow Valley Nonprofit Collective events. These events provide opportunity for ongoing networking, skill-building workshops, and collective problem-solving. Secondly, we will investigate options and models for the sharing of centralized resources and assets, including research to further understand the specific types of space and equipment requirements of nonprofits. This shall include research into the feasibility of the development of sharing platforms such as skills, space, human resource, and community knowledge banks. The data from the survey suggests that some Bow Valley nonprofits may be operating in scarcity and survival mode. The challenge with scarcity is that it can become a mindset that does not allow for abundance or innovation. It can keep organizations in cycles of scarcity, which can present as being fiscally vulnerable, such as piecemealing numerous one-time project-based grants and looking for quick fixes and easy wins, when structuring for long-term success and economies of scale is a much more efficient use of limited time and resources. Unfortunately, many organizations in scarcity mindsets struggle with building a sustainable plan and may further shy away from fundraising ventures. When scarcity mindset is predominant, it becomes even more important to convene folks to gain core skills through workshops and mentoring opportunities that can support the creation and implementation of strategic plans that help organizations rise above survival mode and scarcity mindset, realigning focus on abundance and possibility. And lastly, we will identify key funding supports, opportunities, and models to assist in nonprofit capacity building. Some of this work has already commenced as the survey and nonprofit collective events elicited quite the buzz in the sector, and there are conversations currently underway that may result in some broad capacity building supports for the nonprofit community. There is also ongoing conversation around Bow Valley's unique economic drivers, namely tourism, as one way to think creatively about how to tackle the large-scale need for unrestricted funding in the future. For example, there is a community impact program pilot underway with Banff Canmore Foundation and Banff Lake Louise Tourism that could prove to be a future model for generating funding through tourism levers, which could then be granted back to nonprofits as much-needed unrestricted funding. As our organization continues to be an active player at the collaborative nonprofit table and convenes in conversation and creative problem solving around the issues outlined in today's presentation, I am confident that as a collective, we will be successful in continuing to align supports with the specific needs of the nonprofit sector. This support is vital as it directly impacts the health of our community and the ability of Canmore residents to thrive, providing opportunity to cultivate a vibrant, livable, and diverse community. That concludes today's presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions Mayor and Council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Wellman, for the presentation and very thorough look at our not-for-profit sector. I'm very happy that that survey was done so that we can understand where things are at. I've never heard the health of the not-for-profit sector being referred to as an indicator species, but it's a very good
That
analogy.
was Ms. Jameson and myself having conversation, so I have to give full credit to Ms. Jameson. I was like, ooh, I like this. So I started looking at it. I was like, it's absolutely a social ecosystem. Mind blown. Thank you, Ms. Jameson.
Exactly. So I really like that. I'm going to use that too.
Me too. It's great.
I had a question. Now, you identified potential, maybe it's workshops or other learning opportunities. Is that going to be in the place of, let's say, a continuation of a speaker series or?
So that's a really great question. question, Mayor Krauser. Currently, what we're hearing from the sector is that they really appreciated the collective events. And they wanted to see them. We asked them what frequency might look like, and they wanted to see them 3 to 4 times a year, which just gives us ample opportunity to actually utilize some of those as workshop opportunities where we could have, experts come and do kind of a piece of learning, and then having roundtable conversation about how we might implement some of that learning into the work here in the Bow Valley. So the speaker series has currently ended. It's still accessible, so all of the material is still accessible online. But I think these collective events seems to be more in alignment with what the sector is saying they need at this point in time.
Awesome. And it also then allows for the networking and sharing of best practices and all that stuff.
Absolutely, and
because
innovation.
Often you can be working in isolation in these not-for-profit settings, and it's nice to know that there's others experiencing what you're experiencing, even if it happens to be challenges.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's that scarcity mindset,
Yeah.
right? Is that it keeps people in silos. And when we're constantly looking for the next small grant, we don't have the time or capacity to come together for innovation. And so we're trying to create the space for people to come together to be able to innovate differently.
Great, thank you. Councillor Faubert, you have a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Wellman, for this report. You had indicated that the survey went out to 167. Does that represent nonprofits from Minithne to Lake Louise, or is it Banff and Canmore, because those are the FCSS departments?
Yes, it absolutely does. So that list of nonprofits comes from the website. So folks who engage with the website, they end up signing up for the newsletter. And that newsletter generated that listing, and so that was everyone who had connected with the website.
Okay, so is it possible there are nonprofits out there that aren't connected through the website?
Absolutely, 100%, which is why we had also put it out on Instagram and Facebook pages and tried to cast that net a little bit wider, but absolutely, it's not encompassing all.
You got really good, I think, return rates, but did you notice any patterns in the people who didn't respond? Were we seeing it particularly out of maybe in any individual communities, geographically, or types of sectors in the nonprofit that weren't as engaged?
Absolutely. So we saw primarily Banff and Canmore is where the folks who responded to the survey were from. So Minithne is certainly underrepresented in this, and so is Lake Louise. There were none from Lake Louise. There were agencies that serve Lake Louise, but nobody from Lake Louise that had completed the survey. But their organization may serve that.
That's
that
excellent.
region.
That's good knowledge for me, because we connect with people at our level of governance, and that could be a good feedback, because we have resources here to share. I have more questions, but I would like to let someone else have a chance.
Okay. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mayor Krauser. Thank you very much. I've been thinking a lot the past while about the idea of volunteerism as a privilege. And you need to have a certain level of status or great enthusiasm to engage in these sorts of activities. Many people in this community do have that privilege, and many do not. And I'm wondering what we're doing to bridge that gap between those haves and haves not of that privilege.
That is an excellent question.
Well, thank you.
I don't know how to answer that because I haven't been part of any of that work. Ms. Gilchrist, do you have any thoughts on that? It's an excellent question. I love questions like that.
You know what, we haven't done a lot in that space because, as Laura mentioned, what we're seeing is much of the impact is related to some of those market challenges that are influencing that privilege. One of the things that we have looked at with one of our programs in particular was I did a deep dive into current trends into volunteerism in November, and that we're finding that for folks who maybe don't have the same opportunity as others to volunteer, that micro-volunteering opportunities, and looking differently as an organization about how you can have things that people can do at home that are a one and done, but they can really see that connection to the impact that they're having, but trying to, the traditional role of here's a volunteer role is the only way that you can feel like you've really made a contribution, that there's this trend towards micro-volunteering that is really more embracing of more folks in community, and how they can participate virtually to do it on their own timeline and their own time frame. And it's short and easy for them to feel that sense of accomplishment and contribution by doing that. So that's basically one of the beginning, but we haven't really gotten very far in what does that look like for us, right? We still need Meals on Wheels drivers or for the various communities. How do we look at some of the roles differently? What needs to stay the same, and where are there spaces where we can really cater those volunteering opportunities to a wider audience?
If I might follow up on that one. I've been thinking about boards as well. And the research I've done is, I'm confused, honestly, whether or not board members, to bridge this privilege, may be able to be paid for their positions in the not-for-profit sector, as well as maybe within the organization of the town of Canmore. And I believe there's a difference there, but I'm confused a little bit. Can board members on not-for-profits be paid?
That's another great question. Ms. Christie, I don't think they can, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like an actual wage, that's not something that happens.
Or a per diem?
But I was going to say, I don't know all the ins and outs, but with certain designation, there's opportunity for honorarium, various different types of support, but in terms of being paid for the position, that doesn't.
So a per diem would?
You know what, wait, I don't know for sure. I mean,
Okay.
Councillor Graham.
That's okay, thank you. That's all right. Maybe
don't
I'll
know
take,
for
I'll
sure.
take that one offline, and it's something I want to follow up with
Yeah.
over the next while here.
Yeah, and maybe that can be a conversation.
Mr.
To dig-
Dradzik has some
Uh,
information.
Board members of nonprofit organizations can sometimes be paid. There's no outright prohibition on it. You would have to look at a number of things like the articles of incorporation or the bylaws for that specific organization, and that organization might also want to consider their own compliance obligations for things like the taxation regimes if they were to apply charities status, their own internal accounting and employment regime, but there's no hard no to this, and there's a variety of models.
And I think it's an interesting question, but of course I think there's a merging of two types of situations. One is a town board and committee, and how would we approach that? How might we approach it differently? Should we approach it differently? But that's the town and how it deals with its volunteer boards, and that's a decision for every single organization that they have to make. And quite frankly, we heard how tight the operating is in these environments. It would be really tough to pay your board in many situations. I mean, there's some larger organizations, I think, that could probably do that, but many of the small ones, the staff themselves are not paid enough to take on the responsibility that they have.
There's certainly challenges there, and I think from an equity, diversity, and inclusion point of view, trying to bridge those gaps is a worthy endeavor. So
Yeah, and once again, that's for every organization to take on themselves, because we
Certainly.
have absolutely no control over any of these organizations.
yeah,
Yeah.
we also have organizations internal, but that's a different conversation. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Faubert.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'll add to, for example, the Museum Society. Museum Association of Canada does not allow board members of museums to earn money by sitting in those positions. So there could be specific like that regulatory things, but it would. And now my question. That was just to help Wade. Councillor Graham. In the staff report on page 2 of 4, there's a list of the supports offered by the town of Canmore. What are the supports that the town of Banff offers, or are they the same just from the town of Banff?
They're very similar. There might be some nuanced differences in terms of amounts or free space versus low-cost space, but they are very similar in scope. Yes, we are in alignment.
So it's just kind of like you're both doing the same things, but offering it in your communities.
Exactly.
Aligned together because we understand that these are the needs of everyone in the sector.
100%, you are correct.
And then the next steps, is the approach for the next steps, and sort of both Banff and Canmore are going to step up to these, or does one do some things and one do other things?
It's a really, really great question, because one of the pieces that wasn't part of the presentation that I would love to share is that at both of the nonprofit collective events, folks were encouraged to dream big. They were really encouraged to think big, take your magic wand. If you didn't have any of the barriers that it currently exists, what would things look like? And two key things came from that. One being creating a collective entity. So kind of an entity whose focus would to elevate connectivity, strategic effectiveness, and collaborate for the sector as a whole. So really kind of elevating it to kind of transformative, systemic sorts of spaces, as well as a collective physical hub. And so these hubs do exist. I won't go into a lot of detail, but the Center for Social Innovation, if you're really keen on this stuff, you can take a look at it. It essentially was a little nonprofit that thought they could. They started in 2003. It was a handful of visionary social entrepreneurs that were saying, hey, like this is getting ridiculous, this photocopier problem, they were calling it essentially. It was referring to organizations working in isolation, paying too much for equipment and substandard facilities, and they just asked themselves, like, what might happen if we share? And that very simple question turned into them owning multiple properties now. They had the right people, right time, right conversations, right tables, and things just kind of converged. And that's what I see this collective, this is capital C Community Collective. We've got some key players at the table right now conversing. We've got donors, we have the municipalities, we have key players that are doing really well in the nonprofit world, convening at this really important critical time, which is why we thought coming to council with this presentation was timely, because I do anticipate in the next 6 months to a year, we'll probably start to see some of these things be activated, and hopefully I will be back with a great update to this, and perhaps even some questions around shifting certain things. But to speak to that is that this is a collective component. And so the two municipalities are certainly legs to kind of that tabletop, but there are other legs. We have our donors and our funders. We have the foundation who's connected nationally across Canada with other funders. And so, yeah, that's kind of what our role is right now, is convening space. The Center for Social Innovation talks about the pyramid. In answering that question, they developed a theory of change, that when you curate space, it's at the bottom of the pyramid, community convenes, and then innovation happens. And so it's a really simple model and theory of change, but when you think about that, I think that the town of Canmore and town of Banff are doing that by co-opting this space for the nonprofit sector to come together to build community and trust so that they can eventually innovate and perhaps come outside of the scarcity mindset and recognizing that sharing and doing more collectively could actually benefit the whole.
Yeah, and I like the analogy of the indicator species, because I want to invest in the ecosystem that keeps those species thriving, because there's an amplification effect to that, because we can't do all that work ourselves. They're already doing the work, but the foundational structural systems are difficult, and our lack of space and cost of living here affects those operationally as well.
100%.
Awesome. I think talking made me forget my last question. Okay, here it is. The amount of money that we provide in terms of grants for nonprofits in our community, when was the last time that was increased? And what are other communities of similar size to us providing in terms of grant funding for nonprofits?
This is exactly why I brought Ms. Gilchrist with me today. She is the bearer of all that knowledge.
Not all that knowledge. I can speak to, we haven't had an increase that I'm aware of since I started at the town of Canmore in 1999. And what other communities are giving, I do not have the answer to, but certainly I could find that out and share it back if it's of interest. Okay, Laura can answer that part.
Banff this year has $43,000 allocated to community grants, but theirs is divided in 3 components as opposed to ours being 1, but it's 43 this year.
And we do 30? And then do we know, like I know like for FCSS, every dollar spent in FCSS is $12 in prevention. Do we know how much money leverage we get for every dollar we grant out? in terms of that benefit? Is that, no?
Excellent question.
Priceless.
Yes. Perhaps we should do that return on investment for next time.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Dr. Cottle?
I don't know if, I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I'm interested in where Councillor Foubert is going. My memory, and it's been a while since I've looked at this program, is that we also kind of reinforce some of the challenges that Ms. Wellman talked about. So it's labor intensive to apply, and it's labor intensive to report, and sometimes what, in terms of your question about return, like I wonder if we give a $2,000 grant, if they've spent close to $2,000 in effort to apply, and, you know?
100%. We have, and currently both my colleague in Banff and myself are talking about, is that allotment best served through this program, or could it be better served in other ways? And that's what kind of this collective entity that we're hoping to continue to move forward will help inform that decision making, right? So what might be the best way to move forward with that? And in the interim, it still does support and help out, so that's okay. It's not doing tremendous amounts of harm. But yeah, I do reckon that there are better ways to utilize that resource. Yeah.
Okay, very good questions.
Excellent questions. I love
I don't
it.
see any other questions, so thank you very much again for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of you being here and for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to item D2, Code of Conduct Bylaw Review. Mr. Driedzik, welcome
you.
to Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr.
Now, I'm
Mayor.
wondering if I could ask your preference of something, because this is an interesting presentation in that sort of after every or number of sections, there's potential motions if the Committee of Whole is interested. Do you want to go all the way through your presentation and then take questions, or do you want to deal with chunks at a time and then we deal with a motion or not at that time after each one? What's your preference?
I have no strong preference one way or the other. If I go through the whole thing first, then what I propose is I keep the slides available, and if you then lead a discussion on each proposal, I'll pull them back up so we can see the motions. I'm equally fine. Is this unprecedented?
Yeah, well, it's just, I like it because it helps inform what will eventually come back to council. So let's do that. Go all
Okay.
the way through. We can ask questions. And then just a heads up to the Committee of the Whole. My intention then is at each one to have a little bit of a dialogue to see if there's an interest around it. And if there is, then I'll make the motion. And then we'll proceed with that one and then move to the next. All right?
So we'll go through the whole thing in order.
Yeah.
I'll present each point. Council will discuss. You can lead the motions, and then we'll move on to the next one. Great. All right. All right, then, here we go. So, Code of Conduct Bylaw. The MGA requires one that governs the conduct of all members of council. The town has one that we'll refer to as the Code of Conduct or the Code, and regulations under the MGA require that it be reviewed and any updates be considered at least once every 4 years. So this is the town's first review. My thinking around this two-stage process is in terms of come to Committee of the Whole first, have the discussion, see if council's amenable to going in the directions we proposed or not. And if the answer is no, then that proposal can die and the code stays as is. And if the answer is yes, then administration will return at a future date recommending some specific wording for the amendments. So along those lines, this brief includes no or very few specific citations from the provisions of the Code of Conduct, and the copy that's attached to the agenda package doesn't include any red line. Just think at the high level of is this a direction we want to go in or not? And if we do have to pull out the code and find a section to make that that choice, then we can. But otherwise, think of it in your own words, in your own mind, as to what I'm recommending here. So in terms of some background here, what do we got? You need three things. You got to make a code. You got to put things in it, listen to the MGA, and you got to review it. And that's it. The first two are done, and we're about to do the third. So in terms of how's it going with the administration review, your code complies with the MGA fully as is. It includes really many good practices beyond those MGA baselines, and I've listed several here. Using an independent investigator who cannot be a town employee or a relative of a member of council, setting deadlines to file and process complaints, suspending investigations during municipal elections and rejecting complaints made right before elections, and using mediation as an alternative to going through full investigations, dismissing frivolous and vexatious complaints or complaints that aren't in good faith. All of these things are good practice, and we're fortunate to see very few complaints for breach of the code and even fewer that go to investigation. So given the above, council could choose to just leave the code as is, but nonetheless, you got to review it, and I've flagged some potential updates here. So why are we here? And that's actually from the slide template. I didn't come up with that one, but now I have to think of a reason. And this is it, really. Trying to figure out what is council code of conduct like. It's not really like other policies that regulate the workplace. It's almost more like other self-governing professions where this is your calling and your members of this guild, so to speak, or this honorable profession, and you basically got to regulate yourself. And on any given day, a councillor could be a complainant or a respondent or one of the decision makers. And along those lines, I see really high value to having council own the code as their own. And that kind of fits with the need to review it every 4 years. It will come up at least once every electoral cycle. And if something was to ever go to a complaint, I think it's way more valuable that sitting council views this as their own code than it is that any specific wording be perfect. And that's kind of my lens to this exercise, is it's yours. But then in terms of some of my proposals, one around applicability of the code. The MGA allows a code to apply to more than just members of council. It can also apply to non-councillors who sit on boards and committees. Your code only applies to council, but that second area has already been dealt with by an existing resolution 254-23 directing administration to develop a separate code applicable to board and committee members. And that makes sense to me if council is kind of regulating itself to have a code of conduct for just members of council and deal with non-council members separately. So no recommendations from my end. The work's already underway for a separate piece. Now, in terms of sanctions, the MGA lists a bunch of sanctions, and then it says you can add more. Your code only includes the list of sanctions in the MGA and no more. So the end. Even though your sanctions could be broader, you are limited by the current code. This is another one that I would put back on council, and if you're fine with that, then that's fine with me too, and there'd be no no motions required. If councillors are interested in potentially broadening the list of sanctions or other remedies if the code is breached, this would be my recommended motion that administration research examples of acceptable sanctions from every municipality, or from other municipalities, because not everything can be done under the code of conduct, and not every potential sanction would be potentially legally acceptable. So that would be the recommended motion. And I guess that's our first discussion point, Mr. Mayor, if you want to canvass your colleagues on this question of sanctions.
Okay, well, yeah, we can go that way then. So I guess I'm going in just sort of like a little bit of reverse. Instead of making a motion and debating it, I'm just sort of looking for some indication if people are interested in potentially pursuing this one. You know, I am, because I don't know what I don't know. And I don't know if there's some sanctions that we might want to have in the code that could serve us well at some point in the future that may arise. So I would be supportive, but looking to see if... Okay, I'm seeing some nodding heads. So I'm going to move that administration research examples of acceptable sanctions from other municipalities beyond the sanctions listed in the MGA. Would anybody like to talk to the motion? Councillor Faubert?
Yes, thank you. Would everything be a sanction, or would there be things that would be considered maybe corrective action that maybe the word sanction doesn't convey the right type of correction we're looking for?
Yes to going broader than sanctions to other, call them what you want, corrective actions, remedies, cures, resolutions. So if council was to make this motion here, I turn my eyes to other things than punitive sanctions as well as part of that research.
I think that, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I support that, and I think that is a really good direction. Thank you.
Yeah, because I think out of our current ones, a lot of them are the suspension or an apology or letter of reprimand. There's only one that I would classify in that realm that you're talking about, and that's a requirement to attend training. And there could be some corrective element there, right? Okay. Councillor Ma?
Thank you, Worship. I would totally support researching what other municipalities do. There might be some more sophisticated options out there. Perhaps other municipalities have looked at situations of repeat offenses, et cetera. And like you said, we don't know what we don't know yet. I think it's worth going down this exploration path. Thank you.
I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move to the next one.
Great. All right. The disclosure of complaints. Right now, the code restricts the investigators reporting to council to cases where complaints are found to be substantiated and the investigator is making sanctions. So this means that in some cases, members of council will have no knowledge of a complaint having been filed or settled or withdrawn, yet alone the nature of that complaint. You know, the advantage of this is that it protects the respondent from circulation of frivolous allegations among their peers when those are going to be dismissed, and it enables you to do your work together without that distraction. The con of this is that it can enable unequal access to information among members of council, because complainants and respondents will be aware of complaints having been filed and may have the documents, and other members of council won't. So I am proposing a change here, and it would basically be this, that council consider requiring the investigator to inform council if a complaint is filed, and to provide a copy of the complaint to all members of council if the complainant is a member of council. So it's shifting that balance slightly more towards equitable access to information among councillors. You'll at very least know a complaint was filed against one of your colleagues, and in some cases you will have a copy of that complaint if the complainant is also a member of council. Any
questions regarding this area? Councillor Graham?
Is this all, I might have missed this. Is this all complaints or is this substantiated complaints?
Well, this would be all complaints. Because right now, the reporting from the investigator only comes if a complaint's been found to be substantiated. Otherwise, they just report statistically on the existence of complaints having been filed, but council would never know.
If somebody should file a frivolous complaint, all of council would be notified of that under this motion?
Under this motion, under this proposal, yes, they'd be notified if a complaint was been filed, but they wouldn't receive a copy of the complaint unless the complainant was a member of council.
And then they'd only get a copy of, in that case, they'd only get a copy if it was then substantiated.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, as it is right now, they'd receive a copy of the complaint even if it wasn't substantiated.
Oh.
But again, these are open to adjustment here.
Personally, I don't think that council needs to be updated on unsubstantiated complaints at this point in time. I'll leave it to my colleagues to chime in on this one, but I think we would see that weaponized within the community, filing of unsubstantiated claims and then perpetrated throughout beyond the investigator. I don't think is personally wise at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Faubert?
I think that this motion is to research, it would consider requiring. So more information would come back to us. I think on the one hand, the first part, what we're measuring here is an awareness of the integrity of council and all of our behaviors as a whole. So if a complaint is filed, do we as a body feel that being aware of that happening is necessary for us to be able to move forward and handle the situation? I think that because we don't get a lot of them, and because it's important that we're aware, I think it's more important that we're aware of what's going on. I like how this resolution is worded, and I think in the second one, it's an entire, like that is a bit of a special situation, and I think that that one is one that I would support as well because it leads to better outcomes.
And just to clarify on process, the presentation today is to get some sense of the areas that council is interested in being looked at, because it will be coming back to council if there are any, and there's already one. So it will be coming back to council at a regular council meeting with a proposed revised code of conduct. Right, so it's not saying that this will definitely be inserted, but this, if we support this, then there will be a recommendation of what it can look like, and there can always be an amendment or something at that time. Councillor McCallum?
Thanks. So I just want to confirm what I think I'm reading up there. This, so that council consider requiring the investigator to inform council if a complaint is filed. So substantiated or unsubstantiated, all of council is notified if a code of conduct complaint is filed against an individual councillor from outside the organization or outside of council.
Or from inside. So if a complaint is filed by any complainant, regardless of whether or not they're a member of the town organization, all councillors would be notified that a complaint has been filed.
And that's just simply, there's a complaint.
Yeah.
Unless it triggers the second part of it, there's no details as to what that complaint is.
Right. But if the complainant was a member of council, then the part below the "and" would come in, and other councillors would receive
get the copy of the complaint.
Yeah, I don't think I would agree with this. I think that having a code of conduct complaint filed against you is stressful enough. will speak from experience. I have had a frivolous code of conduct complaint filed against me in the last term, and it sucked up 5 months of my life, and it was quite stressful, and it was unsubstantiated in the end. But if I had dealt with that and then having all of my colleagues know about it at the same time, I think it would have made it even more stressful. So I'm not down. Thanks.
Okay, would anybody else like to provide their feedback or ask a question? Councillor Maw.
I think this is a question for Mr. Dresik. Is there, I can understand where Councillor McCallum is coming from, like, say, like, something coming from the outside. Is there a way we can handle it differently if it's amongst the council itself?
Yeah, this is like an all or nothing option.
Yeah, like, can we get a little more, like, you know, like, I can understand people using this as like a weaponized tool outside of things, but within the council itself, this is amongst a council situation. I would appreciate amongst my colleagues knowing if it came down to that.
Yeah, this can be tweaked. And again, the kind of judgment call you're making is between equal access to information amongst yourselves and not having to other councillors hear about frivolous complaints that may go nowhere. So a couple possible tweaks here. One would be, if you do want to kind of move this forward in some way, you could have council require the investigator to inform council if a complaint has been filed where the complainant is another councillor.
Yeah, like an inter-council situation.
Yeah, inter-council situation. So you would still not hear of complaints from the public until the investigator had proceeded to make some findings that they were substantiated, but you would know if a complaint had been filed by one councillor against another. So that's one possible middle ground, and then you strike this down off below the and. Another possible middle ground would be to leave discretion to the investigator to share a complaint with other members of council. The system relies on a heavy amount of investigator discretion as is, and that could be something that you turn back over to the investigator as to whether they feel need to share the complaint itself with other councillors.
I'm going to go to Councillor Hillstad.
I would be open to the first part, like if, council consider requiring investigator to inform council if a complaint is filed by a fellow member of council. More for a tweak for the bottom one in my mind is, like, to me, the only reason I see us needing to see a copy of the complaint is if council actually has to get involved. So if interviews are required or something along those lines, then that's when I would be wanting to, have that information before I have to, if for some reason the investigator wanted to interview council, if you're getting interviewed and you have no idea what's going on, that's a problem. So that would be the only time I'd be like, yeah, I'd want to know what I'm getting myself into. So that's the only kind of situation where I see, because again, then you've gone further into the process and it's not just, then hopefully at that point it's not necessarily a frivolous thing, but you still could have that option where then that part of the investigation shows that it's frivolous. So, but then at least you have some idea of what's going on and why you might be going to an interview if that ever were to occur. So that'd be kind of my tweak to it, but I'm open to, again, having some tweaks to this one. Just, I don't know if this one's how it is right now is, I'd like to see it.
So here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing actually, you've offered a different nuance there, but I'm hearing there's some, but maybe not a lot of interest in the first half of that, of just being in, like, for me, I want to be notified if an investigator has deemed a complaint substantiated.
Yep.
I don't want to necessarily understand if somebody's got a frivolous complaint against them. But the second part, I think it is important for us to know if a complaint is if a council member is the complainant, then I would like to see the complaint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a motion of that second part only, and then I will provide space if anybody feels that they would like to make that other motion. So I'm basically dividing these. So I'm going to move that council consider providing a copy of the complaint to all members of council if the complainant is a member of council. Okay? And so would anybody like to speak to that motion? I do have a couple of names here. Councillor Graham, is that before? No, that's fine. And Councillor Hillstead. So seeing the council consider providing a copy of the complaint to all members, requiring the investigator to provide a copy of the complaint to all members of council if the complainant is a member of council. Okay, yeah, that's what it is. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now, as I stated, if does anybody wish to bring a motion directing that the investigator inform council if a complaint is filed? Period. Councillor Graham? Okay.
I have no interest in knowing every frivolous complaint that is filed. But if it's been substantiated, then should council be?
And that's already in there.
It's already in there.
That's already in the code.
That's already.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody wanting to do that part, so let's move on to the next one.
All right, role of complainants. So the code as it stands says very little about the role of complainants at all. It allows any person to file a complaint, but it doesn't really describe what the complainant's role in the proceedings is. So at one extreme, you could have a system that's almost like a legal action where the complainant is the one who basically gets to decide if the investigation process moves forward, and the complainant could maybe settle or resolve matters, and it just dies, and the complainant is the one who proposes the specific sanctions or remedies, and the investigator will only really consider those. At the other extreme end of the spectrum, you could have a complainant who's almost more like a witness or a whistleblower, and their only role is to give information, and the investigation will either move forward or not based on the investigator's decisions. Then a middle ground would basically be where the complainant gets to participate fully in the investigation, and they can maybe ask for sanctions, but they don't get to direct the investigator as to whether the investigation moves forward, and the investigator is free to recommend their own sanctions. If council's comfortable with that middle ground, then the bylaw can just live as is, and even though it really doesn't say much about the role of complainants, we would be able to navigate the process with that kind of middle ground role. So it's really, you really only need a resolution if you want to go to a strong complainant model where they're in the driver's seat, or if you want to go to a weak complainant model where they're just the information giver. So there's no resolution from me, but I don't want to let this one slip by without your discussion.
First of all, does anybody have a question to understand the status quo and what's being recommended? Councillor Mall?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Dredzik, from here, if the investigator proceeds and has like recommendations, are those binding upon the council, or can the council like work from that and choose otherwise, et cetera?
They're non-binding.
Non-binding, okay,
Council
great.
is the decision maker.
Ultimately, okay, so we're not abdicating anything there to the investigator.
No,
Okay.
no, and that's kind of one of the hallmarks here of this model.
All right. Seeing no other questions at this time, I'm just asking members of the committee of the whole, is anybody uncomfortable with the status quo? Not seeing anything, so we will just move on to the next one. And I'll tell you what, wherever we are at about 2:30, unless we're really close to finishing this, we will be taking a break, because I'm recognizing people may need a break. and they may be uncomfortable for those reasons. So please move forward with dispute resolution.
Finish this one, okay. So dispute resolution. I mentioned one of the best practices here is that the code contemplates mediation as an alternative dispute resolution process. However, it's worded so that the investigator attempts the mediation, and if the mediation fails, the only option left is to go to investigation. One of the things we're starting to discover in the legal profession is that there's concerns with processes where the same person acts as a mediator and then an adjudicator, or a mediator and then the fact finder. So I am proposing that we research some broader models. Alternative dispute resolution, great, but having the same individual where the mediator hat and the investigator hat creates some concerns in terms of potential success for those open discussions at the mediation stage, and what the investigator has heard or hasn't when they switch hats. So the resolution is, apart from the spacing errors, is this: that we research other alternative dispute resolution processes from other municipalities to include in the code.
So I'm going to go and make that motion in a moment, but first I want to ask if anybody has any questions. Seeing none, I'm going to move that administration research examples of specific alternative dispute resolution processes from other municipalities to be added to the code. I'm a big proponent of alternative dispute resolution, and the more options, the more likely that you can fit whatever situation arises best as possible. So I'd love to hear what others are doing. Would anybody else like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay. Investigators' findings.
So this is a lot like the discussion you just had about when complaints are filed. Right now, the investigator is required to provide their findings to the complainant and the respondent. Sounds good on the surface to not have findings distributed too broadly, but if you consider a situation where the complainant is a member of the public, it creates a possibility that investigation findings will be released to a member of the public before they are provided to all members of council. So again, it's an access to information among councillor issue. So what we're proposing here is that the investigator provide the investigation report to all members of council, and that they inform the complainant of the outcome of the proceedings. It looks like the slide is cut off here, but that's basically, see if we can move this up into the screen for the resolution.
There you go. So question, what's the rationale to, I understand why it'd be important to provide all of council with a copy of the investigation report, but what's the rationale of not providing it to the complainant?
I think it's going to depend a lot on the nature of the complaint and the allegations and what comes out at the back end, if any of that reports to be privileged, or the sensitivity of it. There's going to be the complainant is going to have some sliding scale of procedural fairness owed to them, and if that complainant has rights that are directly and adversely affected by the councillor's actions, and there's a finding that a breach did in fact occur, then that duty of fairness owed to the complainant might require something more substantive, like they receive a copy of the investigation report. And in that situation, you can imagine that they're going to do something with it, whether that's use it for other actions or go public. They will use it to advance their own cause. Now, if you can imagine a complainant who's almost more like a soft whistleblower coming from more of a public interest perspective, believes that there's some breach of code and are representing broader concerns. They may not be as directly and adversely impacted themselves by this breach, and the duty owed to that complainant may not warrant providing them with a full copy of the investigation report. It may be sufficient to notify them of the outcome of the investigation. It could be anything from the investigation is closed to the investigation is closed and here's what happened, to here's a summary of the report, to here's the full report. So I think informing the complainant, giving the complainant a full copy of the report is kind of coming from the right place, but it might not be due in all situations. And if this motion was to go through as worded, it would leave the investigator with discretion as to how much they share with the complainant when they inform the complainant of the outcome. And in some cases, it may well be the full report.
Thoughts on this, Councillor Faubert?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Driedzik, the outcome of the investigation, that report, is that a confidential report, or does it become public if it is given to a member of the public?
If it was given to a member of the public, then you would assume it's public unless that member of the public who received it was part of some kind of confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement with the town. If the investigation report is internal to the town and to council, then it would remain confidential under various FOIA exceptions to disclosure and sometimes under legal privilege as well. But once it's out, so absent further agreement with a member of the public, it's out.
Say I'm a member of the public and I make a complaint, and I don't like the result, and I'm not given a copy of the report. What legal avenues are open to me to pursue some sort of satisfaction that I don't get to see the result of my own complaint?
You would likely start by making a FOIP request, and you'd have to see the response and the exceptions to disclosure, and then you would go from there as to whether you had that request reviewed. If that member of the public was in litigation with the town or the council, then there could be document discovery and document production rules applicable there too. But they would have to take further steps either way.
What do other jurisdictions do?
I don't know offhand,
Okay.
but I do know from looking at investigation process beyond council code of conduct matters that is very, very difficult at the front end to make a strong commitment to a complainant or any member of the investigation process receiving a full copy of the investigation report. And even though, as I mentioned, that idea is coming from a place of fairness and good faith to the complainant, it might not always be appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Cotto?
Yeah, I just want to support what Mr. Driedzik is saying, just in our limited experience with other investigations, that it's really hard at the outset. There's, I think, a fine balance to strike. The clearer you are in this code of conduct about policy and procedure and what will happen, in some ways the better, but it's really hard to imagine every circumstance, and what we found is that a one-size-fits-all approach does not work. So on the one hand, having a complainant not be given anything, doesn't build a lot of trust and can be a problem, but giving them everything creates a different problem. And so it might be worth thinking about how can you write something that allows for the spirit and intent you're going for, but provides flexibility based on the circumstance. And partially, I believe you get the best result by hiring and working with an investigator who you trust, who's giving you good advice, and to have them help navigate the situation so that there's a bit of procedure, but not so much that you're tied down and create a different problem.
What I think is I really appreciate that, Dr. Cottle. Thank you so much. I think that as long as the complainant is informed of the outcomes with an explanation, not necessarily the full report, but some sort, like not just full, like it's over, right? Like it's not just like a one word, like, yeah. That would build that procedural fairness and ability for the complainant to understand the outcome, not just be informed of it. And that's that area. And so I think you're there. So thank you so much for answering my questions.
Councillor Graham?
If we look at the slide, would you add right here, what did you call it, an explanation? Yeah, not just the outcome, but explanation. Again, I'd be very careful here about binding the town to too much. We could include this wording, and I can come back with some more specific wording for the bylaw. But it is a strong caution about complainants obtaining information that's not been shared with council as the decision maker.
I even think the way you had it, nice and broad, the outcome didn't presuppose that you weren't explaining it. I think that, yeah.
Councillor Graham?
Well, I'm just going to let Mr. Juzik make his changes here. Yeah, I think I'm certainly leaning towards giving the discretion to the investigator on this one, and letting them kind of sail those seas as they see fit, and finding that balance between too much and not enough information being put forward. So it was more of just a comment, I think.
Councillor Mott?
I do see value in having an investigator provide a report to fellow members of council, though.
Yep. Okay, and where I'm at is I totally support the first part. I'm having trouble with the second part. I'm wondering if it is that the council consider having the investigator inform the complainant of the outcome of the investigation and, subject to exceptions for privilege, or something else that you'd recommend, a copy of the investigation report. So what is it that we're concerned about going out, privilege and confidential information, or?
I think the fundamental concern is that a complainant in the public could get a copy of an investigation report before anyone else on council's even seen it.
Yeah.
That's
so the first part deals with that.
That's the fundamental issue.
Okay.
That's partly dealt with by having the investigator report to all members of council. The second concern is that complainants might not be due a full copy of the investigation report in all purposes or in all situations. So leaving some discretion to the investigator as to what they share here, I think, is advisable. And closing the loop should be, with the complainant, should be done in all cases. But you may not want the complainant to have a full copy of the report in all cases. And again, I don't want to wordsmith
yeah, so I guess, and not to belabor it, but I mean, we are trying to give some direction.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's a fundamental principle of natural justice or something like that, that you get the outcome of your complaint. Now remember, to get to that point, it has been determined that it's substantiated, it's not frivolous, and some finding has been made. Either it's been denied, which I would think would usually not cause a problem, or it's been allowed, and while it might be embarrassing, it's still about a public process that has been substantiated. So that's why I'm having difficulty with why they wouldn't get a copy. I'm fine with them getting a copy, maybe under some conditions of disclosure or anything like that, but I'm having trouble with saying that they may not. I guess that's where I'm struggling.
Can I make a proposal here? What if the first part of the resolution were to be put to the vote? And the second part of the resolution here, if you could have me look into the standard practices and the legal or other policy justifications for sharing or not sharing investigation reports, basically how much do you give to a complainant and when, then I can do some follow-up.
I'm fine with that, looking to see if there's anybody that is concerned with that. Okay, I think that that's a good way forward. So I will move, I'll make, first of all, that council consider having the investigator provide the investigation report to all members of council. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And then the second one.
I'm going to put here that council direct administration to research and recommend practices for reporting investigation outcomes to the complainant.
Okay. So I will so move that. Anybody wishing to speak to the motion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We do still have at least another 2 to go. And so I'm looking to council. Is a break called for now? Let's take 10 minutes. Okay, we're going to take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 2:50.
Works for me.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're back from break, and we are dealing with, we're back from break. And we're dealing with item D2, Code of Conduct Bylaw Review. And Mr. Driedzik is taking us through each of his sections, and we have just finished investigators' findings, and now it's the response to findings. Please proceed.
That's it, as to where we are. So the investigators now provided their report to council, and as your code is currently written, the respondent will now have a chance to rebut that report or to further respond to those findings back to the investigator. And what I'm proposing here is that response to the report from the respondent actually get made to council rather than the investigator. And my thought here is that to keep it as is invites a cyclical process. The respondents already fully participated in the investigation. They've had a chance to respond to the allegations and speak with the investigator and provide material in the investigation. And the investigator makes their findings and reports, and at some point that process needs to end and switch to council deliberating and being the decision maker. So it makes more sense to me that if the respondent takes issue with the investigator's findings, that they provide that response directly to council. And then council will receive the investigator's report and the respondent's views on it and go about deliberating those submissions. So it creates a break in the process and a switch.
Councillor Faubert?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Driedzik, when the respondent makes a response to the investigator's report, does the investigator have the opportunity to revise or to consider that information and change the report, or is it done?
I think that's the issue, is that right now the code of conduct's written as if it's done. But if the if the respondent was to provide a rebuttal to the investigator's report, it implies that the investigator would then go back and revisit their findings or review the report. And this is the concern that I'm flagging for you, is I believe that could create some kind of cyclical process where the respondent and the investigator continue to go back and forth, when I think what really needs to happen is for council to hear the respondent's view on the investigator's findings.
Say that the respondent's first opportunity to actually see allegations or evidence or the substance of what is being said about them is in the report's finding and conclusion. If that's the first time the respondent gets to see any of that, shouldn't they have an opportunity to respond that the investigator can consider?
I think they should have an opportunity to respond, but I'm simply proposing that response go to council. The investigator is independent. They're an outside source, and they made their findings on having run the investigation. And
so the investigator wouldn't be interested in the respondent's response to the things that they haven't heard yet? I mean, it's just from a procedural perspective, there needs to be an opportunity for the respondent to respond to the investigator before a final report or decision is made, and then that response to the final one goes to council. That's what I said. Is that?
So you would propose, basically the respondent responds to the investigator may make some changes to the report and it'll be cut off at that time?
Yeah, that it's just one go. You got one, like, it's not a back and forth cyclical thing, but that, say the respondent wanted to challenge some of the information that's been provided to the investigator, that's been used to make, to come to some conclusions or decisions or recommendations. What opportunity do they get to do that if their first chance to even see that information is when the final report is provided?
Their response would be to council under the model I'm proposing, because they're basically being given, if you go with the investigator and the respondent continuing to go back and forth, then the respondent's now actually getting additional opportunities in the process to alter the outcome of the investigator's final findings. So I see.
Ms. Hyde, did you have something you wanted to offer?
I just wonder if I have something helpful to add. So currently, the investigator is required to notify the respondent within 10 days of receiving the complaint. So they already have to notify the person who's been complained about within 10 days. I think, and then it goes on just to say, to describe how the investigator can undertake an investigation, and it doesn't specifically say as part of the investigation they must speak with the respondent. So I wonder if that's the piece that, rather than the respondent responding to the actual report at the end. Like, I think what we're talking about is having them be involved in an investigation first.
Well, what I'm hearing is that might be helpful, but I think it's the respondent may look at that and go, oh, wait a minute, though. Did you consider X, Y, or Z? Or that's clearly a mistake, and I can show you the statute or the email or whatever that proves it. And so giving them an opportunity to basically answer the decision that's ahead of them. Is that what you're referring to?
I just, if the final report contains information that the respondent has never seen before or heard before or had an opportunity to respond to, then that they should have an opportunity to respond to that information before the report is final. If that's my only input, I'm fine with how this is. It's just a procedural fairness issue in that if there are things being said happened and the respondent doesn't get to respond to those specifics in any way whatsoever, then are they really, it becomes a little challenging. But because their name's the respondent, right, there should be some opportunity for them to understand fully the content, like the facts, and be able to respond to them if they felt they wanted to.
Okay. Councillor Hillstad?
So with how it is currently worded here, with going back to council, could council then, say there is something that's like, oh, like I can prove that, that is not what I said. Like, here's the email. Clearly, they gave you some falsehood, which I do get the fairness of this because I'm like, yeah, if their investigation turns up turns up some stuff that's actually incorrect. If it stays the way that you've recommended it and it goes to council and then the person responds to council and says, like, here's the actual facts, does council then, can they send it back to the investigator, or what happens then? Because like if it's like, no, here's some actual proper evidence that actually completely discredits what's just been finalized, I think that's where I'm seeing the issue, is that we might want to have that thing where it goes back to the investigator and they can be like, oh, okay, like someone fed me some false information here, and it's more just a due diligence thing where if someone can prove unequivocally that X, Y, or Z happened and the other person said it didn't, that's where I see the issue if it goes straight to council, because then what would council do with that if it's like, yeah, it's really obvious that that section is completely inaccurate? Like, what do? Do we send it back to the investigator to investigate further, or do we just make a decision on our own at that point? So that's what I wanted.
Yeah, that's a bit open-ended, and the code's silent on that too, about sending things back. But it's kind of the same issue in a different way, is that at some point there has to be a cutoff, and council has to step into their deliberation function with the available information. I don't think there's a one right or wrong answer to this, and it's really.
I totally
really where you want to
Not wanting to have a cyclical cycle. I
want to
think
cut
that-
it off. Let me put it this way, there's nothing to stop you from making a resolution to send something back to an investigator or somehow directing administration to re-engage the investigator if council got the respondent's rebuttal to the report and said, whoa, you think, wow, this could change the fact findings. But I think more often than not, the respondent will have a chance to be heard in response to the report, and council will do what it does. This was my proposed motion. Not sure that will resolve all different views on it today, and they're all legitimate.
Councillor Mara.
I think my question might have been answered, but isn't it part of the investigator's job to do the findings, and are they allowed to speak to the respondent to find out if it's a true fact or part of the investigation? They're already having that. I mean, evidence could be given to them, or oh no, I have the rebuttal to that email or whatever it is, etc.
During the course of the investigation, the investigators got really broad power to go back and conduct interviews and ask for more information. So say, for example, the investigator meets with the respondent and then meets with some other interviewees and then decides, oh, I want to go back to the respondent and hear from them again. The investigator could do that. I think that, so there's going to be opportunities for the respondent during the investigation process, and the investigator is going to have power to hear from the respondent further. But the issue is, when does this end?
Okay.
And once the report's in, that's my proposal.
So what I would like to suggest, well, actually, let me hear from, I haven't heard yet from Councillor Graham on this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, my only comment was the same as Councillor Mara's. A thorough investigation should include rebuttals and cross-examinations and et cetera, et cetera. All of that should happen before a final report. So I would expect a final report to be thorough and well investigated.
Okay.
No question.
Councillor Maw.
No, thank you, Worship. Because right now, I think the quality of the report should get us to that point, because right now we're only talking about the respondent getting a chance to respond to the investigator's report, or like what happened to the complainant getting a chance to respond to the investigator's report. You could go on and on. I think we get the report, we can discuss at that point, decide if we want to go further. Yep.
Okay, so here's what I'm concerned about, and I hear what you're saying about you need to find a stop. I'm just wondering if the answer is a preliminary report is provided to the respondent and complainant, or just the respondent. We have to remember, what we're talking about is the respondent whose reputation is on the line here, right? And so to have a report that may contain some errors, may let a genie out of the bottle that could be explained to council, but the damage is already done. And so I think that an investigator would probably welcome some feedback, because their reputation's also on the line. If there's something that they've clearly mistaken or haven't considered, then maybe they want to hear that, and if it makes any change to their decision, that will be up to them. But maybe there's that one opportunity before a report is finalized to help avoid that situation. So I'm not inclined to support this. But if somebody would like to move it forward, then I would allow that space to do it, of course. Councillor Faubert, did you have something to add?
Yes, I wanted to thank everyone for the discussion, because you kind of in your mind start going down all these possibilities, and you're trying to make sure that you're covering off every possibility. The one thing that occurred to me during the discussion is that the respondent, in their response, if this was the way to council, could use that response to try and address issues. I mean, it's not, I don't know the answer, but what I see here is that everyone is getting in this process, council will get a copy of the report anyways, but the way the process is structured now, the respondent is able to respond to the report, but council doesn't see that at all, right? So council sees the report, but council doesn't ever see the respondent's response to the report. That just goes to the investigator. Is that correct?
Council would likely see it as part of the investigator's final wrap-up and disclosure of all the main documents. It's just a question of who it goes to. And if your concern is that, the respondent's rebuttal could change the investigator's findings or head off some damage to the respondent, then the best solution may be to leave the bylaw as is. Because the rebuttal will go to the investigator, and then the investigator will take it upon themselves as to whether or not they want to provide any addendum or update to their report to council, and they may decide, yeah, this has changed my findings, or no, it hasn't. But that doesn't solve the problem of the when do you shift gears from closing a report and moving on to decision making.
Okay, Councillor Ma, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out in my mind here, like, when do you switch gears? Because this can go back and forth. And also, like, as Mayor Krauser pointed out, that, yeah, perhaps the respondent's reputation is on the line, but at the same time, I think the complainant's reputation could be on the line, too. And they could feel that as being something. And then when do they get a chance to rebut the rebuttal, and back and forth? And that's, I can see these challenges here, of how this can just loop and loop and loop.
Well, I think that can be taken care of through a preliminary report and have an opportunity for a response. And it could be from the respondent and the complainant before it's finalized.
Are you considering bringing a motion with that piece, a preliminary report process instead, or is that kind of defaulting to what our existing process is? It's hard to say.
I'm thinking it, because I don't have that in front of me, and I mean, that's something I can bring it as an amendment to the time the code comes back about a preliminary report, because it's basically then working within the system that's already there.
Okay.
Councillor Graham.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing as Councillor Ma, if you were willing to bring that preliminary report idea forward. I do like that one for one last rebuttal behind the scenes before it is.
Okay, well, maybe so that it's proper wording, I'll try bringing this in, that council consider the investigator providing the respondent and complainant with a preliminary report in order for them to provide a response within a certain time, before the report is finalized.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I missed this, but did you also consider the option of having the investigator's preliminary report go to council and then get updated based on the rebuttals provided to the investigator?
I would like to see the final report. I don't want to see something if it's potentially going to change.
Yeah, I want the final as well.
Right, because then that will, yeah. Okay, so there's a motion that basically the council consider having the investigator provide a preliminary report to the respondent and complainant for their response within a limited time prior to the final report being issued.
To council.
To council. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call, Councillor Faubert.
Do we currently allow the complainant an opportunity to respond? Or just the respondent?
I'll have to check the bylaw here.
Okay.
It's only the respondent, Cheryl? Yeah.
I like this
No.
because it comes back to us with options, and I think that we're heading in the right direction. But I'm interested in considering this further in the future.
I think you're settling on something here that's yours, and that's good. If you want to make this motion, my one proposal is that we link this back to the question of how much of an investigation report does the complainant get to see? Because this could create a situation where, again, a complainant may see the bulk of an investigation report before any members of council see it, and potentially in a situation where it might not be advisable to disclose a full report. So I think you've settled on something that works for you, and if I could just add that caveat.
Yeah, so I think the previous motion that we made said a subject to, right?
Yeah.
And I would think that it would, because this is just providing you some direction, I think that you can then make sure that the same caveats are applied in order to protect any privileged information. Okay, I will then call the question on this motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, moving to council discussions and decisions. Deliberations and decisions, yeah.
Final one. This is a big one. So I'll kind of summarize it first and then make a proposal that this be developed. So basically, this deliberation process needs to do several things. It needs to provide procedural fairness to the respondent and to other people who are affected by the complaint and the findings and the process. It also needs to allow council to freely deliberate on sanctions if it comes to that. You know, you're sitting in a quasi-judicial adjudicative type function, and that may involve some deliberation without the respondent deliberating and voting on their own cause. And then you really need to uphold the public interest in having a process that uses resources efficiently and comes to a conclusion and deals with complaints if they're founded. So really, the code leaves a huge gap here. The code just stops providing guidance when the investigator reports and really says nothing at all about council's deliberation process. So this gap should really be filled. So what I'm proposing here to balance these multiple needs here is that, well, firstly, the respondent will get to respond to allegations during the investigation process, and we've already discussed that at length. I don't think there's any harm in encoding their right to be involved in the investigation process. Next step would be that the investigator briefs council in camera on, well, we'll call it in a closed meeting, on the report findings and recommendations, and the respondent should be included in that briefing. So that they can hear the findings and the recommendations there with their fellow councillors who may be in a decision-making role. Council would then meet a second time in a closed meeting to have their own discussion on the investigator's findings and recommendations. This would not be a decision meeting, and by virtue of not being a decision meeting, it would allow a respondent an opportunity to participate, and this should fully ensure that those duties of fairness to the respondent are met. Then finally, if council is going to make a decision on sanctions, that would occur at a regular meeting so that a vote could be done on the sanctions. It would take a council resolution. That meeting could have a deliberation in a closed section of the meeting, but the vote would need to occur in public, and the respondent should not participate in that decision-making meeting. So my thoughts here, and there's a few, one is to look at the self-regulation professional model as the best model we really have here. And typically, self-regulating professions will have an investigation stage, and then they'll have a disciplinary hearing if it comes to it. And the respondent will fully participate in the decision or in the investigation, and if they contest the findings of the investigation, then they will have a right to be heard on the topic of sanctions. But they would not be part of the decision-making panel that deliberates and votes on the outcome of their own case. That would be done by other members of their profession. It also fits with the model for other municipal tribunals, where there's a public section where all the parties participate in public, and the panel gives them a fair hearing to the best of its ability, but then it can retreat in camera to make its, to have its discussion around the decision, and then it will issue a public decision at the back end. Then my third thought, if you follow the model that I proposed, is that it may head off any issues that arise around respondents having a pecuniary interest in the sanctions, because several of the sanctions in the Code of Conduct could monetarily impact a councillor. So if a respondent is to participate in a deliberation and decision meeting, they're going to have to then self-assess for pecuniary interest, potentially recuse, and it adds a whole level of procedural complexity and an extra issue that can be avoided if you create a process where the respondent can fully be heard in the early stages, and the rest of council acts as the decision panel. So that's all outlined in the written report. It's very difficult to capture in a motion because we would have to amend and add to several provisions of the code. My resolution was basically to adopt what I've outlined in the written report, if this sits okay with you.
So I'm very supportive of that. There's one tweak that obviously you would work into it, and that is if the findings are essentially showing that the respondent did not breach the Code of Conduct, then the last two bullets would not be allowed or would not be needed.
Yes.
Because they would just end with the investigator sharing that no harm done.
Yeah, and the provisions of the code for the investigator's report will capture that and ensure it happens if they report that there's been no breach and there's nothing to decide on. The case is closed.
Councillor Graham?
I'm wondering if administration thought about if the complainant is a member of council, should they be included in the deliberations?
My view is that they should not. And again, I'm going back to what would other self-regulating professions do? They would enable the respondent to participate fully in the investigation stage, and they would allow the respondent to be heard on the question of sanctions or other outcomes if they oppose the investigation findings. But that respondent wouldn't be the judge in their own cause.
I think the question is about the complainant.
The complainant.
Oh, sorry, the complainant.
If the complainant is a
I
member
misheard
of
you.
council, should they be allowed to be part of those discussions?
That's a great question.
I'm full of them today.
My sense, no, that's an excellent question. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you
that's all right.
properly. Yeah, that's another gap in the code. My thinking off the cuff here is that the complainant could participate. There should be no pecuniary interest on the part of the complainant because they're not subject to sanctions. The complainant will have a view, and potentially a strong one, on the outcome of that decision, but it's not necessarily any kind of disqualifying bias in a council matter or any conflict. My thought is that the complainant could participate, but again, it's your code, so it's good you raised that.
Councillor Faubert?
Sorry, it was already, my thing was already answered by Mr. Drzejczyk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mott?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just thinking of gaps in the code here, Adam, maybe just talk through with me. So say if it's like we've got 6 councillors deliberating, comes to 3-3 on the votes, what happens then?
You would go to your procedural bylaw and look at what happens in tie votes, and I believe it dies.
Tie wins, okay, thank you, just double checking.
No, tie loses.
Tie loses, okay. All right. Yep, defeat wins, thank you, just double checking.
Okay, anything else on this one? I'm prepared to make this motion. Okay, I move that council consider adding the decision-making process proposed in administration's March 19th, 2024 briefing to the code. And in just speaking to this does not mean that we're approving it. It just means that we're asking that it be prepared so that we can see what it looks like, and then we will approve, amend, or mix at the time it comes to council. Okay. Okay. Anybody wishing to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And yep, Councillor Graham.
In light of recent events, I'm wondering if administration is considering any recommendations around criminal investigations and what powers a code of conduct may or may not have in a situation like that.
It's a good question. I'm not entirely familiar with recent events that you're referring to. Is it other municipalities? Yeah, okay. I know what you're talking about. Okay, so you have a question here, and it's a good one, and I have considered it. Is should the code of conduct require councillors to comply with other laws that don't specifically speak to the function of a municipal councillor? The criminal code would be a great example. The OHS Act would be another example. We left that out of the current slate of recommendations, partly because of the lack of a concrete fact pattern to say, oh, this specific law is at risk of being breached by councillors, and that's a significant issue that we should include in the code. The other option is that you just have some boilerplate requirement for councillors to comply with all laws, which to me seems.
I think that's
yeah.
definitely. I think that's definitely implied in the code of conduct. But I think what Councillor Graham is getting to is before there has been a determination on whether there's a compliance with the law, i.e. a conviction or an acquittal, during that time of investigation, should there be anything addressed in a code of conduct as to what happens in that situation?
Exactly.
Like suspension from councillor duties or other functions.
Yeah, like leave with pay or something like that. I don't know what the best practice is in that regard.
I would take you back to the sanctions section and tie it into that, because whatever sanction was imposed in that situation would have to be generally acceptable as the type of sanction you can do in a code of conduct. My other caution, though, without having researched this further, is that a councillor hasn't been convicted of anything. So unless you were to make it a code of conduct offense merely to be charged with some form of legal offense or to be alleged to have breached, to be subject to regulatory proceedings or something, unless that in itself is a breach of the code, then it's hard to then move to investigations and sanctions. So you'd almost have to create a whole separate stream of the code. It's no longer about investigations, and it's now about what do you do when councillors have out of work legal allegations. Does that capture your concern?
Yeah, I think that there's this strange period in time where there's an investigation, and what council's duties should or should not include during that time.
Yeah,
I think it's a question worth investigating if we're going to open up this code?
It's a good one. It didn't make the staff report, so I turn it back over to you all if you want an extra motion on what to do in that situation or not. I'm not prepared to make a recommendation.
Can I?
Yep, Dr. Connell.
I'm a little, intending no disrespect, Councillor Graham, I think I'm really reacting to the current situation as a context for this conversation because I have a lot of emotion about that. And I suspect maybe some other people do as well. So what I would find helpful is to get out of a circumstance and to talk about this generally. And I think what we're talking about is the need for, I don't think it should be focused on whether or not there's an investigation. I think it should be the ability for a council member to ask for a paid leave, for a variety of circumstances that may happen in a councillor's personal life. And that there's maybe a better conversation to be had there than to hitch it on to a specific circumstance.
I apologize for hitching it to any circumstance whatsoever. That was not my intent. But there are circumstances that are.
I think we are moving towards a formal recommendation here. And if you're looking at leaves, that's something that could potentially be built into your procedural bylaw or some other organizational program rather than making it a code of conduct.
Ms. Rogers?
The Council Remuneration Committee is also researching leaves for council for a variety of reasons, so I think it's captured potentially there in the recommendations that they'll be bringing forward to you.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay. So question's been answered. Was there anything you were wanting to bring forward? No, okay. Then in that case, thank you very much, Mr. Driedzik. That was a big one. And of course, committee of the whole is a good place to have these conversations as we prepare for a bylaw that's going to come back with revisions in order to make the process smoother and to make sure that administration is preparing the bylaw in accordance with council's direction. So thank you for all of that work.
Thank you all as
and
well.
I do want to point out and not lose that I appreciate in your report, and I know I've heard from you personally that based on a conference that you went to that dealt with code of conducts, that actually Canmore is doing a lot of things right, and this is about tweaking that.
We are. I mean, that's where today's presentation started, is you have a bylaw that goes beyond compliance and shows other best practices to start with. So you're improving on a good thing. And that's my view. In the stakeholder engagement piece of the report here, you'll see I did go to the Municipal Legal Advisors Conference and connected with some of my other town solicitor colleagues afterwards around complaints and investigations in their municipalities, and we're doing well here. So it's a good place to start from.
Yeah, great, thank you. Okay, so we'll now move to item D3, service level inventory.
Okay, Mayor Krausert and members of council, I'm here to update you on our latest efforts on, I mean, I'm jokingly calling it version 2.0, but I think it might be 22.0. At least it feels that way. But we're continuing to work earnestly on doing a service level review and creating a service level inventory that we can use in a variety of different ways in our work with council and the community. So we have been working on this for some time in a bit of fits and starts and having a few challenges. You may recall that in November we held a workshop with council to really look at service level inventories from a variety of different communities in Alberta and to update you on that project and to really get some alignment on what we wanted to do going forward, given the challenges we were having. And so we've really decided to intentionally focus on a really introductory, simple service level as the starting place. It's one that's simplified, it uses available information rather than creating new data and metrics. It'll make the project accessible, and it gives us a beginning stage of building capacity to really trial having a service level, figuring out how we can use it, and then potentially building out into the future to do more and better things for us. So in order to kick off this new stage of work, I wanted to introduce you to our consultant, Trina McCarroll, who has joined us on Zoom from the consulting firm Hello Courage. Trina is leading this work with CST and the management team, and is just here today to provide you an update on the project. So I'm hoping you can hear me, Trina.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. You sound great. Over to you. You can take it from here. Just let me know if you need anything.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Am I able to see my screen, or you have the presentation in hard copy?
Can you share your screen with us? We don't
Sure.
see it yet.
Do you know what? Let's just see if I'm able to. I think I have to be made a host. Is that possible?
We're saying, it looks on our end like you should be able to share.
Okay, let's see. Share.
Oh,
Yep.
it's working. There it is.
Okay, great.
It is also in council's package, but we can see it now too.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Your Worship, and the rest of council. I was delighted to be in your council chambers last week with your senior leadership team and got to meet everyone, and what a really great group. And I'm really excited to be able to help you with your introductory service level inventory.
Great, welcome.
So can everyone hear me all right? Going well so far?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Since you are familiar with municipal service level inventories, these first few slides I'll go through fairly quickly. I'd love to hear any questions or discussion you have at the end. Certainly want to make sure that we're all on the same page about an introductory version of a municipal service level inventory. So as you know, this inventory will provide a list of services that are provided to the community and also internally within the organization between departments. And it's been used around the globe and really across Western Canada in the last decade or so, and across all of Canada for a few decades. And they're foundational to a lot of other sophisticated municipal planning, budgeting, risk management, asset management, community engagement, lots of places that can use this work once we have the foundation in place. So the main version of the introductory municipal service level inventory are: what services does the municipality provide? Why are you providing them? Like under what authority, either legislation, council policy, or in a lot of cases, past practice has dictated the current services that are being provided. And then we're trying to really get an understanding of what are the current service levels that are being provided. And this is a tricky portion for a lot of municipalities to describe the level of service. So we really try to get some information around the quality of the service in available information that we have, maybe the quantity or the reliability, the duration, trying to get some information, both sometimes descriptors and then also quantifiable data that is available on hand about the service that we can use to understand the service level. You know from your workshop in the fall that there's lots of benefits of creating an inventory, both internally to continue sophisticated planning and budgeting and planning for the future, and then also with the public, understanding they can help understand the services that are provided, all that the municipality does, and it really works towards that trust building, accountability, and transparency that a lot of municipalities are looking for. But this is the big but, is that full-blown, really comprehensive service level inventories are really challenging for mid-sized municipalities to create. Most often mid-sized municipalities don't have things that other large municipalities have called corporate planning departments. And I've done that role in other municipalities for over a decade, and I can really sympathize with small and mid-sized municipalities that they don't have that staffing in place, understandably. And so you can't have that expertise in-house quite yet. And so there's also capacity issues in terms of time, and really sophisticated metrics often aren't available yet in mid-sized municipalities. So I've really recommended that the best way to start with service level inventories are an introductory approach, where we gather all of the available information that you do have, either in software reporting systems that's currently within your municipality, or also from a lot of knowledge that long-term employees have gathered in their minds for a long time. There's often a lot of really good wisdom that we can capture from long-term employees. But we really simplify the process so that we can have a successful first step, an introductory service level inventory, a really solid list of the services, the descriptions, and the service levels. And then from there, you can really use it each year to be more sophisticated processes from then on. But getting the first inventory under your belt is the hardest step, and that's why I've really had some success with other mid-sized municipalities about making it as simple as possible to begin with. So this is the process that we're going to undertake over the next few months, and I'm trying to do the bulk of the work myself so that it doesn't impose a really onerous process upon the municipality and upon your managers and your senior leadership team. And so what I do and my team, and we've done up for other municipalities, is we conduct all of the research with all of the existing plans, the existing work that's been done on this project already. We'll make sure to capture that, as well as anything else that you have available. And my team and I will collate all of that and bring it together. And then I check in with your managers with the draft descriptions of the services, and they talk to their staff, they look in filing cabinets, they look in any software that you have for any available information about the service levels. And then I host workshops with your senior leadership team and also with you as council, so that we can really achieve a collective understanding about the service levels. And that's the main, there's two main outcomes that I really try to achieve with these. One is collective understanding between council, between administration, and then eventually with the public about what do we provide and at what level. And then also for some connection throughout this process. Sometimes these processes, and I understand whenever consultants come in, can be very nerve-wracking for staff and for the leadership team, but I really try to have both clarity and connection in all of my service level inventories so that it can be a positive experience, that the staff can be proud of the services that they provide. 99% of municipal staff are working as hard as they can for the betterment of the community. And so I really try to make sure that we have both transparency and accurate information about the service levels, but that it's also a really positive process for staff, for council, for the senior leadership team. So then we'll get the introductory service level inventory approved. And then I also like to leave processes with the municipality about how you can use it in the future. Integrate it with your budgeting, integrate it with your planning processes that are going forward. And we can't develop super sophisticated processes overnight, but to have a game plan and a roadmap for how each iteration can get continually more detailed and more useful with each year as you use the inventory. So that's a little bit about the introductory version of the service level inventory. I'd love to hear any questions or discussion from council and really find out how we can make this the most useful process for Canmore.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. McCarroll. Appreciate your presentation and being here to introduce Hello Courage and how the approach is being taken to the service level review or service level inventory. And I'm looking now to my colleagues to see if there are any questions at this point. I am not seeing any questions, so I think that you've obviously are going off in the right direction, and we look forward to being involved in the process as it moves forward.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to meeting all of you and working with you and your team.
Great, thank you. You have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Moving to item D4, Railway Avenue Central Project Update. Mr. Asarte will be providing a verbal report. Welcome to Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. Okay. All right, I'll start off by just updating on the scope of the project. It's been a while since we've looked at this. So footprint shown in red dash, water main replacement, sewer main lining. If you'll recall, a bit of this work with the water main was added after the project was initially approved based on the utility master plan, which has us replacing essentially all the valley bottom utilities over the next 15 to 30 years, somewhere in that time frame. They're getting close to the end of their service life. We obviously don't want to retouch Railway Ave again for a long, long time once the work is done on the surface, so getting the underground utilities done makes sense now. There will be stormwater improvements, a full rehabilitation of the road, some pretty significant intersection improvements at Main Street, and bus stop improvements, pathway improvements, and street lighting upgrades. So the whole corridor gets rebuilt. There's obviously a lot of interface with existing development and elevation place, and so getting all those details right for how things tie in is very important. The budget for the project is $6 million for surface works and $3.55 million for the underground utilities, split as shown. And so the work to date, we've been progressing the design. This is reflective of about a 95% complete piece of work at Main Street, just to illustrate what it's looking like. And at this point, there's still some intersection design around the signal phasing and some of the interface with the adjacent businesses. You'll probably recognize the Drake corner as being really constrained. We've got some different grades. They're working with us to look at whether or not we can improve some of that. We're working with Rosencrown. And then to the north, you can see the provincial building, and there's some encroachment onto that parcel to make the space all work. So we're working with the province as well on some of those details. Things have progressed further down the corridor. This is the elevation place entrance. You'll recall originally the bus was stopping in line with traffic. Now that's shown stopping in a bus lay-by just north of the elevation place access. There's also a bus lay-by to the south, which the through traffic lane goes around, but that lay-by then continues as the lane to the south. So the design is nearly complete. Now, originally we proposed in the project a potential of a 2023 construction. That was contingent on market conditions and getting the design complete and out for tender. At this point, we were pushing kind of for year end initially, and with work on other projects and our consultants being busy, that work went into January. And so as we were looking at the schedule and whether or not to tender into 2023 season, we gave some consideration to some of the other factors at play here. We've got a busy year. We've got work happening on Bow Valley Trail, which is going to be taking up a lot of bandwidth, and that's also a traffic management consideration. And while manageable, it's something to think about as you're looking to tender another big project. And there's some opportunities potentially with a later construction. We've got the commercial coming along in Three Sisters, and so that will provide an alternative place for people to go grocery shopping, for example, during construction of the railway corridor. And we're seeing inflation easing and the labor market settling, which is a really positive thing after a number of years of things being quite crazy and extremely challenging. It's looking like things are leveling out a little bit. So when we put all the pieces together, we're at a point, certainly we could have gone out with a 60 or 80% design in January and tendered that and pushed for construction this year. We're at a point now, though, where we're having good success with projects where we get tenders out very early in the process. We're doing RFPs rather than low bid tenders, and that's providing an opportunity to work with a successful proponent to put together good plans. And the idea of rushing a tender out to market and trying to do a lot of construction just felt risky and felt kind of counter to the direction that we're trying to take our projects right now. And so those were thoughts going into this construction season and why we haven't tendered the work yet. So what we're proposing is that we'll continue to work on the design. We have some TIP 20 work happening right now, some traffic signal optimization that's being done by Mobicon and ISL, and they're proposing some changes that we're looking to implement here for the busy season that we think will help with improving traffic flow for all road users. We propose to continue working with those directly impacted stakeholders on the corner of the intersection and getting that design right. That might provide some opportunities to improve the interface there, and right now we're kind of at the minimums that we'd like to be, particularly on the Drake corner, so maybe we can work with the landowner to improve on that. We have right now a line snapped along the interface of the Elevation Place frontage, and so we're using the time to dig into that a little bit and see if we can improve the integration of the plaza and entrance area to the frontage and the sidewalk and path that will ultimately run along that. We're focused obviously on Bow Valley Trail, and really I think this would be an opportunity for us to see our first major roadworks project under this new framework for procurement, and hoping by late summer to have a big chunk of that work actually completed. And so around that time we'd return to council. We would have Bow Valley Trail behind us. We can see how that work goes. In a lot of ways, Bow Valley Trail is actually a little bit more difficult. In some ways, it's more difficult than Railway. It has similar traffic volumes. The utilities are far deeper. The storm on Bow Valley Trail is, we're leaving off where the scuba divers, we're picking up where the scuba divers left off from the TIP 20 project. So we're still deep. We trend up as we go north Bow Valley Trail, but it's still a really challenging utility project. On Railway, we're lining the sewer. So there'll be a couple big excavations, but we're not digging up the entire sewer line. We're lining it. That's the piece for that. And then the water line's not as deep. We've got a lot of room to stage traffic as we work through Railway. We're quite constrained on Bow Valley Trail. So I think we've got lots of access management as well on both of those projects. So I think we work through the summer, we see how the project goes. We'll have a better idea of the types of community impacts we could expect as we get into Railway, potentially into next season or beyond. And that would be a good time to come back to council, provide an update, and we can make a decision on project timing at that point. So that's the update for today. I'm happy to take any questions you have on project progress.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Sarte. Appreciate the update. Looking to council to see if they have any questions. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Sarte. In the renderings at the beginning, that one. What's the green color space? Is it green?
Is it green on there? Is it? It's teal on mine. That's curb line.
Curb line. And then the shaded green. The shaded green.
Oh, here. Here and here.
Yeah.
That's landscaped area.
Landscape. Okay. Landscape area.
Yeah, so we've worked with the developer of the home hardware site. There's been some rework of the property lines through that subdivision, which has afforded us a little bit more space to adjust the alignment of these facilities a little bit further north and more in line up on this side. And so it results in a little bit more open and green space up there.
So then there's also landscaped space next to the driving lanes?
Correct, yes, in this area as well.
Is it harder to maintain those, given that all winter just muck and salt and dirt goes on there? And I've noticed on Palliser Trail, the grass doesn't grow anymore in the landscaped boulevards. Is there something more we can do to make sure that the landscaped area is landscaped?
No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we do grass boulevards all over.
Yeah.
I think we really focus in on them because we see them kind of acutely here, but if you drive through Calgary, the edge of road is typically grass that's struggling to grow with the salt and gravel. It's not ideal, but at the same time, we're really limited. The alternative is hard surfacing, and oftentimes we're doing that as well. So you'll see in Gateway, for example, on the side of the back of the curb, we're putting in a bit of concrete, a couple feet worth of concrete, with the hope that that remaining landscaping can be somewhat protected. Most of the corridor here actually will be fully hardscaped as it is now, so that won't change. And then these islands here, I'd have to look at the actual landscape plans, but many of these little thin slivers end up being hardscaping as well, because under a certain width, it's not even worth trying. So potentially, yes, we could add a little bit of concrete along the edge here if we find that that's working, and that's probably a final detail that we could look at, yeah.
I mean, I would defer to the Parks Department. They know what they're doing. They maintain all of our green spaces. Yeah. But that space might also serve as snow storage in the winter?
That's right, yeah.
That's right? Okay, awesome.
That's right. Yeah.
And then if this project is, as we're looking more 2024, is there any cost implications or savings?
At this point, we're seeing things kind of leveling out, so we're not expecting any major inflation. Okay. There hasn't been any deflation per se. Just broadly speaking, I would say certain areas, I think we're seeing some deflation, but overall, I don't think it's a big movement at this point. We're just simply not seeing it as a big risk of there being inflation.
Okay.
With all that said, we are getting an updated cost estimate based on pricing we've paid on other projects, and so that could inform fall decisions around budget time, depending on where those come in.
And does pursuing that RFP process versus a tender and working a year out help secure your trades at price points this year?
It's interesting because if you go far out, you have to make some assumptions about the future, and so inflation could be built into those assumptions, and we likely saw some of that, particularly 8 months ago when we signed this most recent contract. But with the market flattening, there will be less of that risk premium built into your planning. But what the planning allows you to do is, as a contractor, is know that you have time to put together a good plan, and so you could de-risk other aspects of your bid, where you've secured the work, you know you can do hiring, you can do the planning up front. So there's a lot of certainty with bidding a project well in advance and being able to work with the town to finalize your plan.
Oh, awesome. May I ask another?
Sure.
In the islands, or in the island heading onto Main Street, there's currently some gateway entrance signage. That design is based on almost I think over 10 years ago. Does this project remove that and put in new signage? Because I know sometimes they've fallen. It's like vertical Canmore. But now I'm rambling. My question is, will signage be addressed in this project?
It will. The intent is to continue to have this feel like a gateway into the town center, and so the design has allowed for spaces either side to be able to put in gateway signage.
Okay.
We're generally speaking, this is another aspect of the work, we're generally speaking decoupling landscaping from the civil works from a construction perspective and a design perspective. And the reason for that is oftentimes your general contractor will hire a sub, and then you're working through your general to your sub to try to get landscape built and maintained. And we've had challenges with that, to say the least, and oftentimes you're dealing with different subs for different contractors. So we've put together an RFP for one landscape contractor who we'd work with on many project sites. And we're also designing separate from our civil contract, but that is a final element that we'll be looking at as the gateway feature for the Main Street portion.
Would there be opportunities to incorporate public art?
We haven't specifically looked at public art through the corridor. I think with any project, there is opportunity. We want to be a little bit careful unless there's a great space for it, and this corridor is very constrained. So I would see it adjacent to the corridor, maybe you know, around the Spring Creek, the access to Spring Creek, further to the south where we have a bit more room. But in the corridor itself, we're really limiting this to functional elements like signage and paths and pieces that are needed within that space.
Thank you. And in the past, I think did the signage come to council for approval, or is that just part of the project?
We'll likely reuse the existing wayfinding signage to mark the downtown. But if it was a significant departure, it would likely be an element we bring back. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm very interested in this project. Thank you for letting me ask so many questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you so much, Andy, for the presentation. When will Bow Valley Trail really start ramping up this year for construction?
They're getting close now. I think within the next week or so, they're hoping to start at the very south end. So right in front of the Blake, we'll be excavating out and tying into the deep utilities where that was left off. They'll work their way north. It's still too early to do actual surface works. There's frost in the ground for probably the next month, depending on how the weather goes. But this is low groundwater time, so they'll be working hard to get those deep utilities in and going full speed, making their way up to the north end.
Okay, so starting soon. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Murrow.
Hi, thank you for your report, for your update. Just a self-serving question. The entrance into Elevation Place and the Elevation Place sign, is there any plans for it being moved?
There is, yeah. That was actually one of the things Trevor mentioned that the team was working on, was locating where that sign was to move to and looking at that entry design for sightlines.
Okay, I thought so. I just wasn't 100% sure, but thank you.
All right. I don't see any other questions. Well, I'm also really looking forward to this project, and while I'm a little disappointed that the construction's being pushed back, I think it's being pushed back for the right reasons in order to make sure that we're doing it right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we'll move to the councillor updates. We have the unusual situation of having 2 reports from each of us because we had canceled the February Committee of the Whole meeting, and so that's why there are the 2 reports. Let me just open it up to anyone to ask any question they have about anything in the councillor updates. quite gone. Okay, we will now move to the administrative updates. And let's down here. Okay, so first of all, any questions around the February update? And just due to time, I'll just open it up to any questions at all. I will ask a question around, it's under under economic development, on page 3 of the report, 117 of the agenda package. The various licenses, it's interesting to see how they go. I was just wondering about what the parking licenses are. Mr. McKay?
So my understanding for that single license that was issued, it was issued to a type of business that was exempt, that was a non-resident business, but they wanted a license for the purpose of being able to apply for a non-resident parking permit in the town center. So it's a unique categorization of this one somewhat unique circumstance. Likely moving forward, that will be reported as part of the non-resident license category as opposed to a standalone one.
Okay. All right, thank you. Other questions with respect to the February report? Okay, I'm going to move in a moment. Oh, sorry, Councillor Graham. Sorry.
For the municipal clerk's office and the FOIP requests, I don't really remember what my question was here, but.
What page are you on?
Page 119 of 180.
Okay.
We've had a surge in the FOIP requests, and wondering if you can kind of give us a little bit of maybe background on those, and if we do expect those to continue, and the amount of work that was involved in them.
Ms. Hyde?
It's impossible to predict. Honestly, we've had one so far this year, and we're almost to the end of March. So is that on trend with previous years? I don't know. And the one we've received so far this year was one of the sort of 5 hours to complete category. So it's really hard to know. It's up and down. One FOIP request can take a lot of staff resources if it's for a lot of records, or we could handle 10 of them that are for a few records, and you know, it would be business as usual. So it's.
And currently we're staffing well for that, or are we bringing people in?
For a large request, a couple years ago we had a really large request that resulted, there were 50,000 responsive records. We started out with and got it down to 8,000. We had to hire extra contract staff to help us with that. Yeah, but so far this year, or last year, what we reported on, we were able to handle those requests with existing staff.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Good question. Any other questions on the February administrative update? Okay, then moving to the March administrative update. Any questions? Councillor Faubert?
Let me get back to the page. Thank you for your patience. The medical first response program grants under fire rescue municipal services, is that where we're at?
Yeah, yeah, anything on the March update? So what
Okay.
page are you at?
Page 124.
Okay, thank you.
I should have said that first, considering how long it took me to find it myself. Is this the first time we've received a grant for providing medical first response?
I'd have to go back and look to confirm that, but I do not believe we received this grant last year. Again, I'd want to confirm, which I can do if that's important for you.
And does this amount, what does this amount represent in terms of how much money we spend providing a medical first response?
I'd have to work with the fire department to quantify exactly what the percentage would be. I do believe there's a move to increase a little bit of funding for municipalities that are part of the medical first response program. So we're not unique as far as a municipality that received some level of funding.
And which letter attached contained the details?
Apologies, the letters were removed. They were, I would say the summary that is provided here is essentially what the letter indicated. There wasn't additional detail that was included.
Yeah, in agenda review, we decided that it was just redundant because it basically says you get this amount.
I was looking for it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think for me, I'm really glad to see that some money is coming in for this, and it felt like we hadn't received this kind of funding before, and that's why I was asking, but I appreciate Mr. Mackay's responses. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Worship. Page 129, facilities. Looks like protective services. You're moving into a new space in March or April. Curious, and maybe in May we could get a tour just to see what the building looks like as well. That'd be great. And another question, perhaps this is also for yourself as well, Ms. Miller. With regards to parking, I've been getting some feedback from the public and also questions. Can there be a little more of a granular parking time? So right now we have the 30-minute segments. There's curiosity. Hey, can we have a 15-minute chunk of time, et cetera? So curious. I know you guys are exploring that at one point. Maybe an update.
Yeah, so work is currently underway for changing the 30-minute increment to a 15-minute increment. We are just testing it a week ago.
Nice.
And looking forward to another update this week as to timelines.
Okay, thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Looking to see if there are any other questions. I'm just looking for one. I know that within the stats for the police, bear with me here. Sergeant Roble, I wonder if you could come to the mic, please, and thank you for being here today. I had a question around on the stats. There's an increase in, what would they be, charges or under the Mental Health Act. And so this is on page 150 of the package. I see that it's like 127% change over that whole period. And I was just wondering, what sort of things are dealt with under the Mental Health Act?
It varies from day to day. I would say we probably average 3 or 4 mental health calls every week. Sometimes we'll get 2 calls a day. What's been a little challenging for us now is we used to be able to take our mental health patients to the Canmore Hospital for an assessment.
Yeah.
And then if they would be committed by the hospital here, we would drive them into Calgary,
right.
Usually to Foothills, for them to be seen by a psychiatrist. That option has been taken off the table for us now, so we can't take him to Canmore anymore because it's not a designated facility. So we have to go directly into Calgary. So we usually go to Foothills or Rocky View Hospital for an assessment, which adds, 2 hours of travel time, and sometimes we have to sit at the emergency at these hospitals for 4 or 5 hours before they're actually seen by a doctor. So that just adds a lot of extra hours
Yeah.
and manpower, officer hours for us to deal with it. It seems to be a bit of a common denominator when it comes to, mental health calls in Canmore. A lot of people like to come to the mountains to relax, and it seems to, and the same thing with domestics. We get quite a few domestics in this area because a lot of people think that they'll come to the mountains for the weekend and work on their relationships, and substance abuse gets, they start abusing substances and then ends up in a domestic situation. So it's a combination of the two, but yeah, we've always had quite a few mental health calls.
So it's my understanding with the mental health calls that these are times when a person has been detained, when it's probably been determined that they're a threat to their own personal safety or the safety of others, and then this allows them, the police, to get them to an assessment or the help that they need? Is that what this is?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the two things that we look at is
Okay.
if they're a danger to themselves or others.
Right.
If they are, then we will arrest them under the Mental Health Act and transport them to a facility where they'll be assessed by a medical professional.
Okay. And then it appears to me that for the most part, there's some things that have gone up. But for the most part, we're having a lot of things go down, and I'm just wondering if you could comment on the general status of criminal activity and safety within Canmore.
One of the issues that I was going to bring up as well are our staffing issues as well.
Yeah.
We're still down. I'm out of the 24 members that I'm supposed to have in the detachment. I'm currently down 6 members for various reasons. So it's a lot of times we're running shifts with minimums. Our minimums are 2 members on at one time. So we try to make sure that we have the necessary coverage in order to deal with the calls. But yeah, it's I'm hoping in the new year here that we've got 2 they call hard vacancies, which means that they have to fill. That hopefully within the next few months I'll get 2 additional members to actually be here. Our biggest issue is everybody wants to be here. Everybody loves the mountains. It's just the cost of living that's really challenging at this point in time, and we hear that from staffing. I talked to staffing this morning, and that's what that's the biggest issue that we have is just the cost of living, and they keep asking for possibly forced housing to be here. Like Banff has some forced housing for their members, so that's our biggest challenge.
Right, and right across all of our sectors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Councillor Mero.
This is under protective services.
Okay, so thank you. I think
Yeah,
we'll
thank you.
probably don't go all the way to the back, just in case somebody has to.
G, and it's on page 125. I'm just wondering, and maybe you won't be able to answer this. It says that the reminders were sent out to businesses via the Economic Development newsletter. Do we know if, does it go out to the registry of the business sector? Any news, does everyone subscribe to the newsletter, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
To get the message out. Because, and I'm really referencing where we're reminding people of the A-frames and T-frame signage.
I believe you need to opt into that newsletter, but my understanding is that there's a large number of businesses who do opt in.
Okay, thank you.
We have also done a lot of proactive patrols and even reactive patrols, especially around A-frame signage over the last little bit and open doors. So a lot of positive engagement and education around what type of signage is allowed under the land use bylaw.
Okay.
And just a reminder, we've had such a warm first quarter, so it's been a lot of education around the open door bylaw and when it still applies.
And in all areas of town?
Yeah, in all areas of town, and then we've worked with the downtown BIA because that's where we were getting some of the complaints.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I noticed photo radar is down significantly, roughly down 60% roughly. I wonder if we could speak to the how and why that is.
Yeah, so with the provincial regulations that came into force December 2022, with the new signage that's been on the vehicle, the ATE operator vehicle or automated traffic enforcement, it's been very effective at alerting people that the vehicle is operating in an area. So people are slowing down. It's serving as a pretty good public education piece of signage, which is what it's intended to do in the provincial guidelines. I think we've also lowered the speed limit across town to 30 kilometers an hour in residential areas, so people are driving slower, and they're driving slower through school zones because they're already going 30 before they hit that school and playground zone. So I think that that has also had a big impact on the photo radar revenue.
And then I note that, thank you for that, that roughly 80% of our tickets are going to non-residents.
Yeah, so that's still trending upwards, where the message is getting out for residents that photo radar is here, what it looks like. They understand that the drive safe vehicle is operating speed enforcement. I think that that education can continue on. We've made sure that we have gone through all the appropriate signage at all entrances in town that photo radar is operating there. We actually did have an ATE audit last year done, so our whole automated traffic enforcement program was audited. We haven't seen the results for that yet, and I just did an update with Public Safety and Emergency Services as to when we would see the results, and they told me that they're just very short-staffed and we can expect a bit of a longer wait there.
So, thank you. So I know that our signage is compliant with provincial regulation. But is it consistent with other communities? Like, do other communities use the exact same sign that we are?
Yeah, yeah.
They are. Okay, so when you come from Olds, you should see that same drive safe.
If Olds has...
If they had it.
Yeah. So a good example, I believe Grand Prairie had similar signage to us.
Okay. Excellent.
And I think it depends, like larger municipalities, they might
Calgary's doing
wrap a whole vehicle or something.
Yeah. So when larger municipalities are operating automated traffic enforcement vehicles, they often own the vehicles themselves. So if that was something that became a priority for us, we could look at that option for 2025. But right now, with the vehicle being owned and operated by the contractor, which makes it easier for them to repurpose the vehicle for other things, they only operate 24 hours in our community. It's easier to comply with the provincial regulations by having the signage.
Mm-hmm. What were our top 3 locations for offenses?
Bow Valley Trail at Ray Gibbon Drive, Benchlands Trail at or near Cougar Creek Drive.
Like the...
like where the bike park is.
The bike park, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And Bow Valley Trail at Ray Gibbon Drive going the opposite way.
So like the same location, but one forward, one... Okay.
Yeah. The good thing is we're seeing like increased compliance in all of our playground and school zones as well, which is really great.
That is great.
Bow Valley Trail and Ray Gibbon Drive does have a lot of accidents in that area. It's a very busy area with the gas stations being right there. Coffee, right? So a lot of people are stopping and turning into that area, and if they are going faster, it doesn't give people behind them sometimes a lot of time to brake as well if they are also going faster. So it is one of our higher collision areas as well.
High would be a relative term, I think. You know, last year we had 10 incidents.
Oh, high certainly a relative term. Parking lots are the highest area for collisions, but in terms of our speed zones, that is the highest.
So I do see that, you know, our infractions are going down, trending, and our collisions incidents are essentially the same. Interesting. Thank you very much.
Councillor Faubert?
No, I think that's an old one.
Okay, that was a legacy one. There we go. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Graham?
In light of these 3 locations that are our high incident locations, do we have any plans for engineering solutions to help with those incidents?
I can let Mr. Asarte speak to it, but we do review the collision data together and use the collision data and the speed data to inform different strategies for how we want to address it. So,
are there any plans for engineering solutions in those 3 locations?
North end of Bow Valley Trail's redeveloping quite a bit right now. We've got a number of new visitor comms going in there, some new pathways on that west side. We're seeing redevelopment on the east side. With that, there's some crossing improvements that are happening that should slow traffic down in that area generally. On Benchlands Trail, near the bike park, it's a little bit of a challenging piece. You've got the steep grades coming downhill. It's a transitioning to essentially a highway cross section developed as an interchange with wide and diverging lanes. And so it's a bit more challenging to make any kind of infrastructure changes there at this time without a major, larger project. So it's not on the books to address that area at this point, but if we were to, and we had just rehabilitated it about 4 years ago. So if we were to come back for another project, we would look at it, but at this point, we're not planning to do anything there.
Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Asarte, while you're there, generally speaking, are the volumes of vehicles that are coming into Canmore increasing year over year?
At the locations that we monitor, we are seeing an increase in traffic volumes at Bow Valley Trail. Last year, there was, I think, a 6% increase in overall volumes at that intersection. That could be related to a lot of the development that's happening in the area as well. Could partially be, we've seen a trend. Originally, traffic moved to Spring Creek Drive, but over time has moved back to Bow Valley Trail. Bow Valley or Spring Creek Drive, last year was the first year we saw a flattening of traffic growth, despite there being ongoing growth in the neighborhood, and travel growth came through mode shift on that corridor. We saw more walk cycle, and perhaps some of that traffic moved to Bow Valley Trail. So we're keeping a close eye. Overall travel trips are going up across the community just because there's growth.
Right. Well, exactly, because we were, I mean, based on the last census, we're growing at about 3% per year as well. So in between visitors and growth, there's more people. I guess the reason I was just asking is because to Councillor Graham's comment about tickets are going down, yet the collisions remain the same. Well, if the collisions are remaining the same, but there's more traffic, that actually tells me that there's less incidents of accidents.
Yeah.
And with the tickets going down, that also suggests increased or more slowing down in those areas. And so it tells me that the things we're doing are working.
Yeah, from 2019 to 2023, overall travel was up something like 20%. But during that time, there was actually a decrease in the number of collisions. So you're exactly right. We're seeing increased travel, decreased overall collisions, and generally a trend towards less injuries, which suggests slower speeds and lower impact collisions. So we're on the right trend, certainly, and we're keeping a close eye on it.
Yeah, great, thank you. Ms. Smithers, did you want to add something? No? Okay, any other questions around the March report? Okay, I don't see any, so everything else then, the package is for information. There's a bunch of correspondence there, and our resolution action list. I'll just, before I move to adjournment, just ask my colleagues if there are any other questions on anything else in the package. Seeing none, I'll then move that we adjourn. All in favor? Carried unanimously. And I note that, strangely enough, we hit exactly the 425 in the package.
Champion.